Just a few months ago, I had a terrifying experience that I will never forget. It all started one night when I went on Facebook. As I was browsing the homepage, looking at posts from my friends and stuff, I got a notification of a new message. I clicked on it and saw that it was from a guy named James. I had worked with James a while back briefly. I didn't really know him that well, and had only spoken to him a few times at the job that we shared. I hadn't worked there in over a year though, and I didn't even know if he still worked there. James said hi to me, and I found it a little bit strange for him to randomly message me, but I said hi back to him. We got to talking a little bit, just catching up, or so I thought. But not long into this conversation at all, the messages from James started getting inappropriate. I stopped messaging him at that point, but he continued to send me more messages. It was at that moment that I decided to delete him as a friend. I wasn't even really friends with him in real life. I didn't know what got into him for him to randomly message me and then talk like that, but I figured that I wouldn't hear from him anymore. Several days went by, and I didn't. But then, one night, I was home by myself in my apartment. There was a random knock at my front door at 10 o'clock. I was not expecting anybody. I got up and walked over to the door. Before I opened it though, I decided to check through my people to see who was there. I thought maybe it was a neighbor, because who else would it be? But James was standing there. I found this to be really odd. How did he know where I lived? I never told him that. I chose not to answer, but he knocked again. I ignored this too. I honestly figured that he would probably leave after I didn't answer the door. I walked away and didn't hear any more knocking for a while. So I remember that probably 10 minutes later, I got up and went back over to the door. I expected James to be gone, but he wasn't. He was still standing there right outside of my door. And I think that he must have heard me walking to the door from the other side, because right after seeing him, he walked up to the door and tried to open it. The door was locked, so he didn't get in. Then I saw him go to his pocket and take something small out. He then went to the door and I believe started trying to pick the lock. As soon as I saw this, I took out my phone and I called for the police. I told them what was happening. They said they would be there as soon as possible. Then I went into my bedroom and locked the door. In case James broke in, I needed to get away from the front door. The police were fast to arrive. Within probably 5 minutes, they were at my apartment. James had not been able to pick my lock or get inside. I remember hearing them talk to James, and I came out of my room and saw that they arrested James for attempting to break into my apartment. I never really got an answer as to why he did it, or why then. Either way, I'm hoping to never see James again. This is the story of when I lost my phone at a park several years ago. It all happened one night when I was running. I would do lots of jogging for exercise, and this one park in particular was my favorite to go to. It was about a 10-minute drive from my apartment, but it had miles of trails, and I found that hardly anybody else was ever there. One time though, when I was jogging, my headphones died when I was almost done. This is probably why I didn't realize I dropped my phone, because my music wasn't on, and I would have noticed it turning off. I would always jog with my phone in my left pocket. It must have just fallen out or something. I was kind of surprised that I didn't notice. When I got home that night is when I realized that I didn't have my phone with me. I realized it could have been anywhere on the trail. I first looked in my car, but when it wasn't there, I drove right back to the park. I retraced my steps and spent about an hour trying to locate my phone, but I couldn't find it. I wasn't sure what to do. I really needed my phone, so the next day I went and I bought a cheap one to use until I either found my phone or decided that I would have to get another one. The next day after work, I went back to the park again. I looked again, but came up empty. I was almost certain by now that somebody must have picked it up. Then, later that night, I was on Facebook. I was on my laptop, just on my homepage, when I came across this post. It had been shared quite a few times, and I saw that somebody had posted they found an iPhone. It looked like mine, so I clicked on the post. This person said that they found an iPhone in a park and were trying to locate the owner. They asked people to share the post in hopes that the owner might see it. The phone was locked, so they said they couldn't find out who it belonged to. Right away, I contacted the person who made the post. It was a guy named Rob. I told him that I was sure this was my phone, and I asked him if I could meet him to get it back. He said yes, and suggested that we meet at the same park where I lost it. I was more than fine with that, but when he said to meet at midnight, I was confused. Of course, that instantly made me curious and also suspicious. I asked him why and said that that was really late. The guy claimed that he worked odd hours and was really busy. He said that that was literally the only time that worked for him. I ended up saying fine, because after all, it was a Friday and I didn't have work the following day. Still, I was very suspicious of Rob. Now, when the time came, I drove to the park that night. In the entrance of the park, there was a parking lot which was empty. Then there was a little bit of a field, several entrances to paths, and lots of woods. So I parked my car at about 11:50. Nobody else was there, so I waited. At midnight, I contacted Rob, saying that I was at the park. This was the only parking lot, so I knew he would have to come here. He did not immediately respond to me. I kept waiting and was getting more and more frustrated by the minute. Then I got a message from Rob. He told me to come to the path and said that he had walked there. This confused me even more, but I really wanted my phone, so I got out of my car and looked around. It was completely silent other than leaves rustling in the wind. I took a few steps towards the path. It was in that moment that I saw what appeared to be two large men coming out of the woods. They were walking in my direction, but a long ways away. By now, I was probably like 50 feet away from my car. As soon as I saw these two guys, I started sprinting back for my vehicle. When I got there, I did not bother to look back to see where the men were. I instantly left, driving away and out of the park. I went all the way back home. When I got back, I went onto Facebook and was going to message Rob. I saw that his previous message had been deleted. I sent him an angry message, accusing him of setting me up, trying to rob me, and I said that I was going to the police. He responded denying it, claiming that he was just running late and would be at the park soon. I called the police. I told them the entire story and showed them the messages on my phone. Then I asked Rob to send me my phone in the mail. He was hesitant and claimed that he couldn't do it. However, the police contacted him after that. After they got involved, he finally gave me my phone back. Unfortunately, there was no proof that Rob got those guys to come towards me in the woods. I believe 100% that he was setting me up to get robbed or something. I blocked him not long after. Hopefully, I'd never see him again. I was by myself at home a few years ago, and a really bad storm hit. I lived alone in a smaller house in the suburbs. It was probably about 8 p.m. when it started raining. Just before sunset, I had noticed that the clouds were pretty dark, and it seemed that a storm was brewing. The wind also picked up, and just after sunset, it started raining. Things picked up quite a bit, and I remember that there was a severe thunderstorm warning in my area as well. I was just staying inside and having a normal night, other than hearing the thunder outside occasionally. But about 20 or 30 minutes into the storm, the power suddenly went out. My TV shut off, the lights went out, and it became pitch black. Everything went silent as well. Now I could only hear the sound of the falling rain outside and the thunder. It was not that uncommon for the power to go out in a really bad storm. It had happened a couple of times over the years that I had lived there. Usually it would not be out for too long, maybe a couple of hours at most. I went on my phone for a while because I couldn't do much else. Then I went over to the front window and looked out, just watching the storm. The rain was still coming down very heavy. I could see my entire front yard, and then parts of the street and a couple of neighbors' houses. As I sat there looking out the front window for a while, I noticed somebody walking down the street. This was odd, because there was no sidewalk on my street, but it was also weird to see somebody out walking in such a thunderstorm. The person was wearing a black rain jacket, and appeared to be a man, but I couldn't see very well. He walked down the street in front of my house, and then I left the window and sat back down on the couch. For probably about the next 10 minutes, I was just on my phone and sitting on the couch in the living room. But then, I remember it kind of sounded like somebody was trying to open the back door to my house. It instantly made me a little bit nervous, but I quickly thought that possibly it was just the sound of something else. I mean, the storm was sort of loud. Maybe something got blown into the back door or something. I couldn't hear that well, but with the power being out, I did hear things from outside much better. So I walked around slowly to the back end of the house. That's where my kitchen was, and I looked out of a back window. Because my house was so dark, I had much better visibility looking out the back. When I did, I looked near the door but saw nothing. This made me feel better until I looked around the rest of the yard. When I did, I noticed that the same man who I had seen walking down the street was back there. My backyard was not very big. The man was at the far side near the fence and walking towards the corner of the yard. It appeared as though he might walk into my next door neighbor's backyard. I had no idea who this guy was or what he was doing, and it was still pouring rain out. I thought that the man might look over and see me in the window, so I moved away from it and I went back towards my living room. I didn't really know what to do about this situation. I stayed in the living room for maybe the next 20 to 30 minutes. Then I heard a knocking sound coming from the back door to my house. It was really surprising to me. I was sure that the man in the backyard had been leaving, but I knew that this had to be him. The knocking was very loud and startling. I got up and walked back to look to the window, but when I got there, nobody was at the door. I looked out of a back window and all around my yard. However, I did not see anybody. I kept looking for like 10 minutes, but never saw anything. I went back into the living room after that. There were no more knocks or strange noises. Less than an hour later, the storm stopped and my power was restored. I kept an eye out back for the rest of the night though, but didn't see the guy again. This took place last summer. I was at home by myself one evening. I live with my husband, but he was at a sports game with one of his friends, and I knew that he would be gone until much later. It was a normal night, and probably about 9 p.m. or so. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the power went out. Everything went black, and I found this to be really strange. It was not storming outside, so I didn't know why this would happen. I knew that we had paid the electric bill like always, so at that point, I went on my phone and onto the app of our electric company that we have. I looked to see if there were any reported power outages in the area. Sometimes, if there are, it will say the cause of it, and it will also say when the power should be restored. So when I logged onto the app, I did not see any information about it. I was trying to figure it out on there for a few minutes, but did not have any luck. As I was doing this, I then heard the sound of glass breaking coming from the back of my house. It was very loud and alarming, especially because everything was so quiet and dark. I could only see from the light on my phone, and I got up and used it to guide my way to the back side of the house. When I got closer, I heard some noises coming from near the back door area. When I finally got within view of the back door, I suddenly stopped. I saw that the window to the back door was smashed, and an arm was reaching its way inside. Somebody was right outside of the door. I couldn't see who it was, but it really freaked me out, and I instantly turned in the other direction. I ran away and went as fast as I could to the bedroom. It was hard to see, but I was able to make it there. When I got inside of the bedroom, I quickly closed the door behind me and then locked it. Then I went all the way into the bedroom closet and hid inside. When I got there, I called the police on my phone. I said how somebody had broken into my house, and because of how quiet it was, I heard the back door open and the guy walk in. I did not know who it was or what he looked like, but I gave the police as much information as I could. The thing that really mattered was that there were officers on their way to my house. So I heard the guy walking around inside for a few moments, but when I got off the phone with the police, I didn't really hear him anymore. I listened closely, but heard nothing. I wasn't really sure what was going on. Still, I didn't dare move or make a sound, and I remained hidden inside of the bedroom closet. I was afraid that any second I would either hear footsteps outside of the door or hear the door starting to turn. If this guy broke the back door window to get in, who knows what he would do? There was probably a way that he could break down the bedroom door despite it being locked. As time went by though, I still didn't hear anything. Within 10 minutes, the police had arrived. They made their way into the house through the back door. Then they searched the entire house, and when they made it to the bedroom, I finally left. However, the police never found the man. The window was still smashed to the back door, and the back door was also left open, but the guy was gone. The police even searched around the neighborhood a little bit, but whoever had broken in had left and was nowhere in sight. And inside the house, everything remained in place. Nothing was stolen or anything. But the police found that the power lines had been cut, probably by the man who broke in. Why he did this, I don't know. I'm guessing it wasn't an accident. I called my husband and he came home. The police then left after getting information about the incident. Since this has happened, we got the window replaced and also installed security cameras. Nothing else suspicious has happened though. A couple of years ago, I bought a gaming computer on Facebook Marketplace. I've been wanting to buy one for a while, and I knew that they're typically very expensive. So that gave me the idea to go on Facebook Marketplace and look for a used one. After several days of looking, I found one that I wanted. I decided to reach out to the seller and ask a little more information about it. The seller was a guy named Jeremy. We went back and forth a little bit, and I decided that I wanted to buy it. It was a pretty good deal, so we agreed on a day that I would go over and get the computer. It also came with a monitor, keyboard, and mouse as well. So after I bought it, I took it home, set it up, and started using it. I was happy with my purchase, and I used the computer for the next week and a half. Then I got another message on Facebook from Jeremy. He said that he wanted his computer back. I was really confused when I saw this, because he had just sold it to me like a week before. He said that he changed his mind and wanted it back now. I didn't want to return it. I liked the computer, and I had already installed several games and other programs on it. I told Jeremy no, I wasn't going to return it. Then Jeremy said that he would give me a certain amount of money for it. The funny thing is that the amount he offered was less than I paid for the computer by a few $100s. I pointed that out, and he said that it was all he could afford to give. Now, when he originally said he wanted it back, I assumed that meant he would pay the full price. I said the answer was still no. I was really annoyed that this guy was trying to get the computer back, and even more annoyed that he wasn't offering the full price. If he didn't want to sell it, then he shouldn't have sold it. However, Jeremy was not happy that I refused to give the computer back. He then sent me a friend request on Facebook, and then started messaging me a bunch of times. I ignored him for a while, but after he kept sending me messages for like 3 days straight, I blocked him. I thought that was that. This situation was strange enough. But unfortunately, that was not the end of Jeremy. Probably about a week after I blocked Jeremy, he showed up to my house. I happened to be home alone and was in my bedroom, on the very gaming computer that I had bought from Jeremy. It was nighttime and about 8 p.m. and dark out. I heard a knocking coming from the front door. I got up and left my room and went over to the living room and then looked out of the window. Jeremy was there on the front step. I recognized him from when I bought the computer. How did he know where I lived? This was really strange. I watched him stand there and knock again on the front door. I was wondering what on earth he had planned. Did he think that by showing up at my house unannounced that would make me change my mind? I stayed in the living room and ignored his knocks. I was hoping that he would just go away, and most of the lights in my house were off, so maybe he would think that I wasn't home. But I watched Jeremy hang around the front step for several more minutes. I was kind of looking around, and I had to move back from the window so that he wouldn't see me. He came back and knocked again on the front door, this time louder. He also yelled, asking for me to come outside. I still ignored him. I walked back to my bedroom, hoping that Jeremy would eventually give up and leave. When I got back to my room, I put in some headphones and sat back down at my computer. For the next 5 minutes or so, everything was fine. But suddenly, I heard a knocking sound. I took out my headphones and looked to the direction of my window. Jeremy was standing there, looking into my bedroom. I got up and ran over to the window and closed the blinds. Jeremy started yelling at me, but I couldn't really hear what he said very well. I left my bedroom and went back towards the living room. By that time, Jeremy had made his way back towards my front door. Then he started banging on it again. I went over to the door and shouted to him that I was going to call the police. Jeremy yelled at me to give the computer back. Then I called the cops. I told them what was going on, and Jeremy still wasn't leaving, and he continued to stay there, even after I got off the phone with the police. But unfortunately, he finally left just moments before the cops got there. I talked to them, gave them a description of Jeremy, and told them my side of the story. After that, the police left and said to call back if Jeremy ever returned. I was afraid that he would, but luckily he didn't. I still have a hard time believing how crazy it was, and I can't believe that that actually happened. I had recently gotten a new car and had to sell my old one. I had bought it used, and it was kind of old, so I listed it on Facebook Marketplace. I was told that was a good place to sell a car. It seemed better than Craigslist, which always seemed a little bit sketchy to me. So after listing the car, I did receive a few messages about it in the first couple of days, but none of them really went anywhere. Then I would get the first serious interest. It was a man by the name of Ben on Facebook. He messaged me and said that he wanted to buy my car. We talked briefly, and basically the guy wanted to meet up and look at the car as soon as possible. I suggested a nearby shopping center parking lot for us to meet. At this point, it was sometime in the afternoon, and Ben wanted to meet that same night. I said that would be fine, and we agreed on 8:30 p.m. in the back of the parking lot. The shopping center had quite a few stores and a very large parking lot. Most of it was usually always empty. It was maybe 10 minutes from my house. So I ended up going there, expecting to meet Ben, who was seeming to be a serious buyer. I arrived slightly early, and after getting there, let Ben know that I was there. Then I just waited. Some time went by, and 8:30 came and went. Ben still hadn't showed up. I messaged him, asking where he was. He didn't respond though. I was getting frustrated. It appeared as though he had changed his mind about the car without telling me. After waiting past 9 o'clock, I finally left and started driving back home. About 10 minutes later, I arrived. At the time, I lived alone in a smaller house. As I was driving down my street, which is usually very quiet, I noticed headlights quickly coming up behind me. I remember thinking to myself, that person was going a little bit fast for this street. By the time I reached my driveway, they were right on my tail. So I pulled into my driveway, expecting them to drive past, but then the car that was behind me pulled in right after. Now my driveway was pretty short, but sort of wide. It could barely take two cars in front of each other. The car I usually drove was in the garage, and I was driving the one that I was trying to sell. So after this car pulled in behind me, I could only see the bright headlights shining in. I had a bad feeling about it. I wasn't expecting anyone at my house, and had no clue as to who this could be. But then I got the idea that maybe it was the guy from Facebook Marketplace. I knew that I couldn't get out of my car, so I turned to the right a little. Then I saw the car behind me start to turn to the right. I didn't know what exactly to do. I wanted to leave, but I felt like my car might be stuck there. The car behind me then started honking. I did not recognize the vehicle and was 100% sure that I didn't know this person. I then turned my wheel and just hit the gas. My car narrowly missed my garage, but I made it. Then I started to make a U-turn, but the car ended up going into the grass of my front yard off of the driveway. When I did this, the car behind me started backing up and turning to try to keep up with me. I was able to make it out of the driveway and started going down my road as quickly as I could. The car behind me was soon able to follow. I drove to the end of my street and then went through some residential streets for a short time. Then eventually I made it to a busier road. I traveled on that for a while, and then sometime over there is when the car behind me stopped following. I'm not sure when, because I was looking forward for several minutes, and there were also some other cars out on that road, but sometime whoever was following me stopped. Then I carefully went back home. Luckily, I didn't see the car again. I just have a feeling that that was Ben from Facebook Marketplace. He was probably just trying to follow me home and never even wanted to look at the car. Maybe he was going to try to steal the car or rob me. That's my best guess. But when I went back onto Facebook, he had blocked me. I tried reporting it to Facebook Marketplace, but I'm not sure what could really be done. After that though, I haven't used Facebook Marketplace since. I live in a fairly small and quiet town. I live by myself, a little bit out in the country. The story I'm about to tell you happened just a few months ago. One night, I was sleeping, but woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I remember that when I woke up, I heard my phone vibrating on the nightstand next to me. I ignored it and just tried to go back to sleep, but whoever was calling me called again. After probably the third or fourth call, I finally woke up completely. To that point, I had kind of been half awake, just wanting to go back to sleep. I hadn't really realized how strange it was to receive a random phone call at this hour. I looked at the phone and it simply said, "Unknown number" on the screen. This was also kind of odd. Now that I was awake, I could tell whoever it was really wanted me to answer, and I accepted the call. I said, "Hello?" but at first heard nothing on the other end. Then I heard the sound of a heavy and deliberate breathing. That was it. I asked multiple times who was calling, but all I got in response was the breathing noises. This had to be a joke. How else could I explain this? I was pretty sure that was the case. I mean, who calls up someone at 2 o'clock in the morning and just breathes on the other end? They probably found some way to not make their number show and were pulling a prank on me. I said something like, "Very funny," and then I hung up on them. Then I went back to sleep. They actually did not call me for the rest of the night, and I woke up the next morning for work at my normal time. It was about 7 a.m., and after getting up, I went into the kitchen. My kitchen is kind of at the front of the house. That's when I noticed something on my front window. There was like a post-it note, and it was sticking to the window, and I found this really odd. It hadn't been there the night before. It was in obvious view of me, and somebody had to have put it there recently. I walked outside and picked it off the window. There was writing in pen on the sticky note which said, "Call me back." I got the chills when I read it. I connected it to the call that I had gotten at 2 o'clock in the morning. This was really odd. Now, I don't just live in a city where there are tons of houses. Like I said, I'm a little more out in the countryside. The houses are spread very far apart. I can barely even see my neighbor's house when I'm in my driveway. My driveway is also really long. For somebody to be on my property, which has multiple no trespassing signs on it, this was really strange. I went to the police that day about it, just letting them know. I didn't really feel like I was in danger, but I thought I would let them know about the situation because of how strange it was. It's a quiet town, and these things don't happen very often. Now, it very well could have been some guy in the neighborhood pulling a prank, but I've never had any pranks pulled on me like that before. I couldn't really think of anybody who would do something like that to me either. Today, it remains a mystery, and I haven't had any strange phone calls since. This is something that happened a few years ago. I buy things on eBay here and there, and have been doing so for years. I like to collect things like sports memorabilia, and occasionally I bid on auctions. One time I saw this autographed football that was signed by one of my favorite players. It had 0 bids, and the starting bid was pretty low. I expected it to go way up, but I entered my maximum bid and then moved on, thinking maybe I had a shot at winning it. The auction still had several days left. Over the next few days, I actually forgot all about it. Then, I got a notification that I had won the auction and I could pay for the signed ball now. When I looked, I couldn't believe it. Not one single other person had bid on the ball, and I had won. I don't remember the exact price. I think it was maybe like $10, and was probably worth a lot more, maybe over $50. I was really excited and paid the money. The very next night, though, I was at home when my phone rang. During this time, I had a landline phone that I had for years. I did not recognize the number on the caller ID, so I didn't answer it. What followed shortly after was a message. A man's voice came onto my answering machine, and he said that he was trying to reach me and mentioned my name. He said that I had won his auction for the football, and unfortunately nobody else bid on it. Then he said that I was getting way too good of a deal, and it wasn't fair at all, but he was going to do me a favor and mail it anyways. He went on to say that he expects me to leave him a very good review after this. Now, this rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't like how he called me up on my personal phone to say this. I won his auction fair and square, If he didn't want the risk of somebody paying $10 for it, then he shouldn't have started the bidding so low. He knew the risks. I went on eBay and looked at some other listings of the same player's autograph on a football. They were going for a little over $50, so the guy lost out on about $40. It's not that big of a deal. Just 2 days later, I received the football in the mail. It was fast shipping because I guess the guy lived in the same state as me. After receiving the football, it was packaged well and just how it looked online. I went on eBay to leave the good review that the seller wanted so badly. To be honest, I really didn't want to leave him a good review after what he did. It kind of annoyed me. But when I logged into eBay, I noticed that he had already left me a negative review. On eBay, sellers and buyers can leave each other reviews. You can leave it positive, negative, or neutral. This affects your feedback, and people are less likely to buy or sell to you if you have a bad rating. Mine had been perfect to that point, and his was pretty good. I think it was like 99% positive. His negative review of me said, "Buyer got way too good of a deal." Clearly, he was upset about it, but I did not feel that it was fair for him to leave me a bad review. What was I supposed to do? I bid and I won. Did he expect me to offer to pay more for no reason? It angered me that he left me a bad review, so I left him a bad review. I said what happened. I said, "I won the auction from this seller for a good deal." He then called my home phone complaining and demanded that I leave him a good review. He sent me a message after this, which I ignored. I didn't even open it. Then, the next day, he called me again. I didn't answer, and he left another message. This one was very angry. He berated me for about 3 minutes straight. I didn't even listen to the whole thing and deleted it, but this didn't stop him. He called me again several times the next day. I got frustrated, and luckily I had call blocker installed on my landline. I blocked his number so that he would finally stop bothering me. For several days, everything was fine. But then, one night, I was at home, and out of nowhere got a knock on my front door. I walked down to the front door, but before opening it, looked outside. It was a man who I did not recognize. I didn't know why he would be here. I answered the door, and the man standing there mentioned my name and asked if that was me. I said yes. He then told me that he sold me a football on eBay not long ago. As soon as I heard that, I slammed the door right in his face. This caused him to start aggressively banging on my door. I yelled at him to go away or I was calling the cops. He was yelling and demanding that I give him the ball back, saying that I scammed him. I couldn't believe this guy. I'm not sure if he was really just mad about the ball at this point, or if he was just mad at me. He kept standing there and knocking on my door every so often. After he didn't leave for over 10 minutes, I called the police on him. When they arrived about 10 minutes after that, the man was still there. They spoke with him, and he gave his side of the story, which I'm not even sure what that was. An officer came inside and spoke to me, and said that the man outside kept claiming that I scammed him and stole his autographed football. I told the officer the whole story, and I showed him eBay proof on my phone. After a while, the police ruled in favor of me. They said that the transaction was fair and I owned the football. They told the man that he had to leave my property and told him not to come back. Eventually, the man agreed and left. After that, I never heard from him again. I still have the football, and every time I look at it, I laugh when I remember the crazy story that goes with it. Several months ago, I sold my PlayStation 5 on eBay. My friend was getting rid of his PS5 for an Xbox, so he sold it to me for a really good price. His PlayStation 5 was a little bit nicer than the version that I had, so I decided to sell mine. I listed it for a good price on eBay as a buy it now rather than an auction. Somebody bought it after just 2 days, and the very next day, I packaged it up really good and shipped it. I sent it to the address that was given from the eBay account that bought it from me. Now, 3 days after I shipped the PlayStation, and 4 days after it was sold, I got a message on eBay from the buyer. He told me that he recently moved and forgot to put his new address on his eBay account. Then he asked me that I ship it to his new address instead. I responded and told him that I already shipped the PlayStation several days ago and that it was too late. The guy freaked out, saying that I should give him a refund because he wasn't going to get it. I told him that he should have realized that, either before he bought it or within the first day. What was I supposed to do? Sit around waiting for his blessing for me to ship it? I mean, normally, people want things shipped as fast as possible after they buy it. He said that he was going to report me to eBay, but that didn't really scare me because I knew I had done nothing wrong. I told the guy that the package will have his name on it, so he should either go to his old address and pick it up, or contact whoever now lives there and ask them to send it to him. In my mind, that was a very logical solution. Obviously, if it was at the wrong address, there was a chance that somebody would steal it, but I mailed it in a box where it wasn't obvious that it was a PS5. The guy did not seem to think my ideas were good. He just told me that he needed a refund, and he kept threatening me, saying that he would have my eBay account banned. I told him that I wasn't going to refund him. Over the next few days, the guy kept harassing me, sending me messages. He kept saying that I had to give him a refund. He really wanted the money, but I wasn't going to give it to him. I just ignored him. So about a week later, I was looking at some of the messages that he sent me, and I decided to look him up, just for the heck of it. His username seemed to be his actual name. It was a first name, an underscore, and then a last name and a bunch of numbers. The last name was somewhat unique sounding, so I thought that I might be able to find him. I wanted to know what this guy looked like that was harassing me so much. I went onto Facebook and entered his name. Just one result came up, and it was a younger looking man. His page was public, so I could see everything that he posted and stuff, and he was quite active. I scrolled down just a little bit and saw a post that nearly blew my mind. He had posted a picture of a PlayStation 5 with the caption, "Just got this bad boy in the mail. Hit me up if you want to play some COD." The PlayStation looked just like the one that I had sold, and it was dated just 3 days after I had mailed the PlayStation, and the very same day that the guy told me that he had the wrong address. This guy was totally trying to scam me. It was a pretty bad attempt too, to be honest. I screenshotted the post and then sent it to him on eBay. The guy claimed that it wasn't him. Then he backtracked and said that it was his friend's PS5, not his. Then he backtracked again and called me a curse word. After that, I never heard from him again. Many years ago, I used to live in this crappy apartment by myself. I had a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom unit on the second floor of the building. During the time of this event, I'd been living there for over a year. So one night, I was by myself, and I had been home for several hours. It was about 9 o'clock at night or so, and I was hanging out in the living room. I remember that I kept hearing the sound of somebody walking down the hallway. Like I said, the apartment was not the nicest, and it was kind of old, so the walls were pretty thin, and you could hear whenever somebody walked down the hallway. But it wasn't a big problem, because the building was usually pretty quiet, and there were maybe 10 or 12 units total on my floor. So it didn't happen very often where people would walk by. But I seemingly heard somebody walk back and forth down the hallway about 10 times in the span of like 5 or 10 minutes. After hearing this person walk by, I got curious as to what was going on. I got up and walked over to my door, and then looked out of the peephole. After looking out for maybe 10 seconds, I heard footsteps. Then I saw a man walk down the hallway right past my door. He was kind of tall, thin, and had sort of long hair, and I didn't recognize him as anybody who lived there, but I figured that he probably did. After walking past my door, he went down the hallway. I kept watching for a little bit, and then I started to walk away. But I heard the footsteps then coming back, like he turned around, so I walked back over to the door and looked out of it again. This time, the man started walking by again, but right as he got even with my door, he suddenly stopped, and then he turned his head and looked directly at my door. It was like he could see me, and I quickly moved back. It was really creepy. The guy started standing there right in front of my door. I did not go back to look. Instead, I went back into the living room. But a short time later, I heard a knocking on my door. I had a bad feeling about it, knowing that it was the strange guy who was walking up and down the hallways. Obviously, I had no clue what he wanted, but I also didn't want to know. So I did not get up and go answer the door, but he continued to knock. He would knock for a few seconds, stop, and then knock again. This went on for several minutes. I got annoyed, and I eventually got up and went to look again. When I did, I saw this guy still standing there on the other side. He started knocking seemingly louder than before, now pounding on the door with his fists. Then he actually tried opening my door. It was locked, but I moved away again, hoping that he wouldn't be able to somehow get inside. He kept alternating between pounding on the door and trying to open it. After this went on for a while, I heard the sound of someone else's voice in the hallway. I recognized it as my neighbor Jerry, who lived across the hall and to the right. The guy stopped banging on my door and I heard the two of them talking. Then, all of a sudden, I heard some shouting and what seemed like an altercation. I went over to the door and this time I opened it. I saw Jerry laying on the ground and just barely saw the other guy sprinting to the end of the hallway and then leave. I went over to Jerry and asked if he was okay. Jerry said that the guy had punched him in the face and attacked him. I went and called the police, and then Jerry and I waited for them. Jerry was fine, but he said that he had wanted to see what all the racket was about because he heard the guy knocking on someone's door. He went out and questioned the guy, and he said at that point the guy just attacked him. The police looked around, but the guy had left the building. After that, the man did not return. I don't know why he was trying to get into my apartment or what he was even doing there. I feel bad that Jerry got beat up, but I'm glad that he was okay. The whole thing was very strange. One weekend last summer, a group of girlfriends and I rented an Airbnb for the weekend to celebrate a friend's birthday. It was supposed to be a fun weekend getaway. We found a cozy Airbnb in a secluded part of the mountains. A perfect place in a beautiful area with no neighbors, so we didn't have to worry about making too much noise while partying. The pictures showed a charming cabin with a fireplace and a wraparound porch surrounded by towering pines. The reviews were mostly positive, except for a few mentions of the host being overly attentive and welcoming. At the time, we shrugged it off, thinking it was more of a good thing than a problem. We arrived on Friday evening, excited and ready to unwind. The host, a middle-aged man named Harold, greeted us warmly. He informed us that we would have the house all to ourselves as he stayed in a smaller guest cabin on the property. As we settled in that first night, everything was fine. We cooked dinner, played games, and just had a good time celebrating the birthday weekend. It wasn't until the second night that things started to get weird. Around 10 p.m., there was a knock on the door. We weren't expecting anyone, and it made us all jump. I opened the door to find Harold standing there, holding a small basket of snacks. He had just wanted to check in on us, seeing if we had any problems with the place, and offered the snacks, which we politely declined. It was strange for him to have visited that late at night, but it was whatever. It was only about an hour later that night, out of the corner of my eye, I thought I noticed a shadow pass by the window outside on the wraparound porch. We went outside cautiously to check the porch, but saw nothing. A little while later, one of my friends said they swore they saw a figure standing outside the same window and looking into the house. By the time we checked it out again, however, there was nobody there. Later that night, around midnight, we were in the living room, trying to shake off the things that we thought we saw and still have a good time. Then, Harold knocked again, this time without any snacks. This time he asked if everybody was okay, saying that he heard some noises. It felt very intrusive, but we began questioning if he had also seen whoever that was earlier moving around the property. We assured him we were fine, and he left to go back to his cabin. The next morning, we decided to check out the surrounding area and do a little exploration. As we were getting ready for the hike, I noticed a strange glint in the sunlight coming from the corner of the room. I walked over and discovered a small camera hidden behind a decorative object. I showed my friends the hidden camera, and we began to search the rest of the place. We found more cameras, one in the living room, another in the bathroom, and yet another hidden in the bedroom. They were all well concealed, but once you knew where to look, they were almost laughably obvious. We quickly put together that the figure we had seen on the porch by the window was probably our host Harold watching us last night, since he also had the cameras set up. We decided to ditch our morning hike and leave immediately before our checkout time. We didn't want to confront Harold because we were creeped out and just wanted to get away from there. We left the keys on the kitchen counter, grabbed our bags, and drove off without notifying Harold. Once we got back into cell service, I quickly opened the Airbnb app and left a review. I warned future guests about the hidden cameras and the creepy visits from the host. It felt important to make sure nobody else would experience what we did. The next day, I reported everything to Airbnb and hoped that Harold would be done hosting forever. This happened just last year. I'm a pretty average guy for the most part. I work a job and I have my own little apartment near the city. One day, I was added by a seemingly random girl on Snapchat. This is not something that happens very often. My first thought was actually that it was a bot account probably. Still, I was curious, so I decided to add the account back anyways. Well, within probably 20 minutes of adding it back, the account sent me a snap. It was a woman named Avery, and when I opened the snap, I saw a selfie from a good-looking blonde woman who appeared to be around my age. She said hi. I responded sending one back of myself and saying hi. She then typed in the chat instead of sending back another picture. Avery told me that she didn't know if I knew her or not, but she went to my gym and occasionally saw me there. I would work out every day at usually around the same time, which was right after I got off of work. There were lots of regulars that I would see at the gym, as well as other people who I did not know. A lot of people went there, and it was a pretty large gym. However, I never really talked to anybody there before and wasn't friends with anyone. I thought about if I had seen her before, and I didn't necessarily remember her exactly, but I thought maybe she looked kind of familiar. She also told me that she wanted to talk to me at the gym, but didn't want to bother me. We got to talking, and it seemed like she liked me. She was very nice, and we had a few things in common. I tried to look her up on Instagram, but I couldn't find any results. There were a few accounts that possibly could have been her, but I didn't know her last name. I couldn't really find anything. After talking for 2 days on Snapchat, Avery asked me if I wanted to meet up sometime. I agreed and said yes. Avery said that she worked at a local bar which was downtown in our local city. She said that I should come and meet her after work that night, and said there was a park right across the street from the bar and we could go there. I agreed, and she said that she got off at 9 p.m. I didn't really think at the time that it was strange to hang out in a park at nighttime. Looking back, it was kind of weird, but I drove to the park and got there. When I did, I went into the parking lot and saw that there was just one other car. I didn't know if this was Avery or not because I was a couple of minutes early. I texted her, but did not immediately hear back, so then I just waited. But after 10 minutes, I was wondering what she was doing. Then she finally texted me back, saying that she was in the park and I should join her. It just seemed sketchy. I told her I was in my car, and I never saw her driving there, and now she was just in the park? The only thing that would make sense is if the other car belonged to her. I had a bad feeling though. For a moment, I didn't know what to do, and I thought about just leaving, but I decided to stay. However, about a minute later, I saw somebody get out of the other car that was there. It was a man wearing a hooded jacket. He began walking over in my direction. I did not know what he wanted or what was going on. So the guy walked all the way over to me, and when he was approaching my window, I just took off. I realized then that I had likely been catfished. After leaving, I blocked the account. I was frustrated by the whole thing, but at least I didn't get robbed or anything, or who knows what would have happened. Looking back, it was strange how she didn't give me any real clear information. I could not find a Facebook or Instagram for her, and she only sent me one picture of herself. It honestly seemed real, and I don't know how that was done, but I know for sure that I've been catfished. Hopefully nothing like this happens again. I'm a female, and this is something that happened a while back when I was in high school. It was almost 10 years ago, and this was pretty early on into the school year. So randomly one day, I saw that I got added by somebody new on Snapchat. I looked and it was a guy named Michael something, but I didn't recognize his last name at all, so I did not add him back and I deleted it. Just a few days later, I got added on Snapchat by him again, and once more I deleted him. However, probably just a few days after the second time that I deleted the guy, I realized that he was actually in one of my classes and went to my school. I had never talked to him before, and he sat in the back middle of one of my classes while I sat towards the front and one side. So I would never really notice him much, but I did recognize him. He was a new student in the school, and prior to that class, I had never seen him before. Well, he added me again for a third time. This time, I decided to add him back, just because I knew that he went to my school now and that he was new. I still did not know anything about him other than that. I was surprised though that he kept adding me, even after I would not add him back. Well, finally adding him was something that I would quickly regret. I think it was the very next day, early on in the school day, and he sent me a picture of himself. It was just a basic selfie pretty much with no words. I responded sending one back. but he then sent me like 5 random pictures. We were both in different classes at the time. Some he took of other students, and others were just of the floor and whatever. I opened them up and did not reply because it seemed kind of weird. Later on in the day, we had the class that we were in together. This teacher did not like it when students would be on their phone during class, so I did not go on my phone at all during the class until the very end when we were done and all waiting for the bell to ring. When I did, I saw that there were tons of notifications on Snapchat from this Michael guy. I looked, and he literally sent me at least 20 pictures. I opened them all, quickly going from one to the next. They were all pictures of me that he took from where he was sitting. I found this pretty creepy. After opening them all and not responding, I decided to confront him in person. The bell rang at that point, but I caught up to him outside of the classroom in the hallway. I asked him why he had taken so many pictures of me in class. He just stood there not saying anything. I told him I thought it was really weird, and I was going to tell him not to do it again, but before I could, he just turned and ran away. It was very strange. Michael was now seeming like sort of a creep to me, and I decided to delete him on Snapchat, so I did. A few days went by, and I saw him in class, but didn't talk to him or anything. Then he added me on Snapchat again for a 4th time. This time, I blocked him. I really wanted nothing to do with the guy. Well, that very same day, I left school when it was over. I drove to and from school and had a car during this time. I remember that I left school, and when I was on my way home, I noticed that Michael was driving behind me. I had never noticed this before and was immediately suspicious. When I made it about halfway home, he was still behind me. I didn't think that he lived near me, and I figured that based on his previous behavior, he was possibly following me. When I had made it almost all the way home, he was still there, and after making it less than a mile from my house, I did not want to go any further, so I pulled over to the side of the street. Michael slowed down in his car but did not pull over. He ultimately drove past me and kept going. Then I went home. I didn't really know what to do about this whole deal. Over the next few days, I noticed Michael in class and I completely ignored him. Luckily, he didn't try talking to me or anything. He also did not add me again on Snapchat or try following me home. And probably a week or 2 after this, I stopped seeing him in class. Eventually, I asked around, and I found out that he apparently changed schools or something. I'm glad that he did. That whole situation is something that I would like to forget. This is a bizarre experience I had a couple of years ago. During this particular time, I was looking for a new apartment. I'd been living with a roommate in this really run-down, beat-up old place. I had recently got a new job and finally had a little money to get a place all to myself, and a place that would be nicer as well. The kind of apartment I wanted did not have to be perfect, but I certainly wanted something better than I currently had. This would only be my 2nd apartment that I ever got, and the 1st by myself. I was excited about it and looked online for the new place. I was still pretty new to living in this general area and had moved there from another state when I got my apartment with the roommate. So I went onto an apartment search website, put in my budget and preferences, and looked through the results. After looking at some apartments online, I selected one that I wanted to take a tour of. It seemed like a really good deal and looked decent from the pictures, so I contacted the management for a tour. I filled out some forms and then was ready to look at the place a couple of days later. When the time came for the tour, I drove to the apartment complex, which was maybe 10 minutes away. However, after entering the complex, I was unimpressed, and I realized that I may have made a mistake even by selecting to have a tour. I had pretty much already made up my mind that I didn't want to move here. Overall, the place really didn't look any nicer than where I currently lived. The pictures online were real, but they sure made the place look a lot better. Still, I got out of my car and met the tour guide, which happened to be the property manager and landlord. I think he really did just about everything. We met, and he said that he would give me a tour of the unit because the people had just moved out. So I went inside with him, and the apartment building smelled old and musty. Inside the place, the carpet was old and beat up, and there was a spider web with a spider in it in one of the cupboards. The guy was talking really good about the place, as if it was super nice. He mentioned that he lived in the unit next door, and we would be neighbors. I was nice and stayed there for the whole tour. When it was over, the guy asked me if I would take the apartment. I said that I had to look at others first, but would let him know if I wanted it. He did the old salesman technique, saying that he had a bunch of other people interested in the unit, and he even said that he had it on hold from them so that I could tour the place. I didn't know if that was true or not, but I knew he was trying to pressure me. He said he had rearranged things so that I could take the tour, so he hoped that I would take the place. I told him that I could not agree to it right now, and if he had to give the apartment to somebody else, so be it, but I had to look at some other ones. The guy seemed disappointed, but then we said our goodbyes and I left. So after this, I knew I wasn't going to move there, and I went home and continued my search. I decided to raise my budget and realized that I could actually afford something a lot nicer than that dump. The next day, I received a call from the landlord of the apartment I had just looked at. I answered, and he asked me if I was going to take the place. I told him that I decided I was not going to be taking it and would look elsewhere. The man sounded very upset. He said that he had it on hold for me and claimed that he lost other renters because of it. I told him I didn't know that, but I never made a promise that I was going to move there, and I wasn't going to do it. After that, the man continued talking and said that he could possibly lower the rent for me. I still said I wasn't interested. I honestly had no desire to live there, even if it was free, especially knowing that this guy would be my next door neighbor if I did. The guy asked me why I didn't want to move in. I found it strange that he was still talking to me about this. I didn't want to talk to the guy anymore, so I told him that I was just going to look in another area, and then I said bye and hung up. The whole thing was very strange. It was pretty unprofessional, to be honest, but it would get more unprofessional. So that evening, the guy called me again. I don't remember the exact time, but I think it was around 7 p.m. or so. It was really strange. I couldn't imagine what he could possibly want. I didn't answer it, and when the ringing ended, he did not leave a message or anything. The next morning, when I woke up, I noticed that my phone had actually been called another time. He had called in the middle of the night at like 2 a.m. I was hoping that this was just an accident, but this time he did leave a message. When I played it, he simply said that he was trying to get a hold of me and to call him back. I didn't want to, so I blocked his number. I thought that was the end of it, and I would never see him again or hear from him again. That story is strange enough as it is. But a couple of nights later, I was at home with my roommate. I was in my room, and it was sometime at night, maybe 8 or 9 o'clock, and then there was a knock at the door. I didn't know who it could be, but I was possibly expecting somebody to be there to see my roommate. I knew that I wasn't expecting anyone, so I stayed where I was. But a few moments later, my roommate came to my doorway and asked if I invited a guy over. I said no, and she said that some guy was at the front door. At first, I really had no idea who it could be, so I walked over to the door and looked through. The same guy was standing there. It was the landlord from the other apartment building. I had no idea what he could possibly want. As I was standing there, he knocked again. I shouted from the other side, asking what he wanted. He asked if he could come inside, and I said no. He then said that he would only come inside for a minute. I said that if he didn't leave now, I was going to call the police. The man finally cursed at me, kicked at the door, and then stormed off. And after that, he luckily did not come back. I still don't know why that guy kept bothering me. I figured that he got my address on the forms that I had to fill out to look at his apartment. I wish that I never looked at that place at all. I ended up getting a much nicer place a short time later, and have been living there since. This happened back sometime in the very early 2000s. During this time, I was living alone in a one-bedroom apartment that I had recently moved into. I was aware of a few of my neighbors, but not many of them. The building seemed to have people moving in and out quite often. It was a larger apartment building that had a giant parking lot next to it where all the residents parked. The apartment itself was pretty old, and not the nicest, but it was alright. So after a few months of living there, I remembered that one night I heard this sort of pounding noise coming from the next apartment over. I wasn't sure what it was. I knew that it was my next door neighbor though. The noise went on and off as it got later and later. Soon, I was trying to go to sleep, but the sounds kept going. I had a hard time falling asleep because of it, and eventually I couldn't take it anymore and I had to go over there. I really didn't want to, but I was left no choice, so I walked over and then knocked on the door. After a few moments, a man opened the door. He was a large man that was bald and wore baggy clothes. He looked at me confused and slightly annoyed. I told him that I was trying to sleep and I was hearing him do something. I asked him if he was hanging stuff on the walls or something like that. The man said no, he was building a table. I guess that made sense, but I asked if he could quiet down because I could not sleep. The guy looked really annoyed but said okay and then shut the door in my face. I felt really awkward after, but it was almost midnight, so I went back and the man did stop and I was finally able to get some sleep. The next I saw of the guy was actually the very next day though. It was nighttime once again. Now I was about to go to sleep. Out of nowhere, I heard this really loud music coming from next door. It was the same guy's apartment. I rolled my eyes when I heard it. I just hoped that it wouldn't last for very long. The walls in this apartment were pretty thin, so noise traveled, but still, this music had to be almost full blast, and it continued until past when I wanted to go to sleep. I didn't want to go over to his place for a second night in a row. I wondered if this was his way of getting back at me or something. I mean, he knew that he was being loud. So I tried my best to sleep. I didn't have any earplugs, but I tried covering my ears and stuff, but I just couldn't. After trying to fall asleep for over an hour and the music still continuing, I realized that I had to go confront the man. So I left my apartment and I walked on over. After knocking on his door, he did not answer. I waited there for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, knocking several more times. Soon it was clear though that the guy was not going to answer me. So then I headed back to my place. I went back inside, hoping maybe the guy would eventually turn it off, or I could get some rest anyways. Just after making it back to my place though, I thought I heard a door open and close from the hallway. Then, moments later, I heard somebody trying to open my apartment door. Luckily, I had locked it right away when I got back in, which was a habit. This seemed strange, so I went over to check. The man was standing right there. I did not want to open the door because I had a bad feeling. He remained there for a few moments, just standing there and looking angry. Then he turned around and walked back to his place, with the loud music still playing. He did not turn it off. I don't even know when I fell asleep, but when I woke up the next morning, the music had been stopped at some point. After that, I reported the guy to the apartment, but I guess he moved out a very short time later. It was good because I didn't have to deal with him anymore. That was the craziest memory of living in an apartment. Back when I was moving several years ago, I got rid of a lot of old furniture. There were many things that I didn't need or want anymore from the house that I'd been living in. That house was just a rental, and I had finally bought a home. My rental house had 1 story and a basement, and there were 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. When I was living in the rental, a lot of the furniture that I got was just cheap stuff. I would either get it for free or used, or just cheap at any old store. Some stuff I did keep, but a lot of it I just wanted to get rid of. I was actually able to sell a few things. With the things left over that I didn't sell, I decided to just list on Craigslist for free. I needed it gone, and I needed it gone fast. Most of the things were not all that nice. There was a dresser, a couple of old lamps, a table, and some chairs. After I made the listing, 2 or 3 days went by with really nothing. Then finally somebody contacted me saying that they would like the furniture. I was really happy that somebody was going to come and take it off my hands. I gave them my address and said they could come by to pick it up. I told the person they might need a truck or a larger vehicle for all of it, and the person responded saying that they did. We agreed for them to come the next day in the afternoon. I hadn't moved out of my house yet, but I had gotten rid of most of the things I didn't want anymore. I already had the furniture up against the wall in the living room near the front door. So the following day at around 3 p.m., I got a text from the person saying they were there. It was then that I realized I didn't even know this person's name or what they looked like. I went to the window and looked out. What I saw was this younger skinny man with long blonde hair getting out of a tiny old car. It was like a 2-door sedan from the 1990s, and I had a bad feeling. How on earth was this guy going to fit any of the stuff in his car? I was afraid that he was going to try to make me drive it to his place or something. The man walked up to the front step and then knocked on the door. I answered and introduced myself. He said his name was Dave. He seemed a little bit strange right from the start. I didn't know exactly what it was though. I invited him inside and showed him the furniture in the living room. I told him that he could just take it now and be on his way. Dave started to walk over to the furniture, but then he walked right past it and went farther into my house. He sort of said something quietly. It sounded like he said, "1 second," but he didn't really say anything more. I wasn't sure as to what he was doing or where he was going, and I was really confused. He quickly went out of sight and went somewhere in the back of the house. I stayed standing there a few moments, probably because it was just so confusing. He had gone completely out of my sight, and I heard him move to the back side of the house. Then I decided to go and walk after him. I heard a door open, and I made my way around to the kitchen in the back of the house. I first saw that the basement door was open. I called down asking if Dave was down there. Then I decided to go down there when he didn't respond. I walked down the stairs and turned on a few lights. There was some junk down there and some boxes as well. Overall, there were quite a few places that he could be hiding. Plus, the lighting down there was not very good. I started to look around and would periodically ask Dave if he was there and what he was doing. I got no answers though, and I didn't see him at all. I was getting extremely creeped out and was afraid that I could possibly be in danger. So after being down there for about a minute or two, I decided to go back upstairs. I didn't know for sure if Dave was down there or not. He could have gone someplace else inside the house, I guess. I walked back up the stairs and went into the kitchen. When I got back up though, I heard somebody walking down in the basement. I knew he was down there. I quickly ran to my bedroom and locked myself in it. Then I called the police. I stayed on the line with them all the way until they got there, which was pretty quick. I didn't bother to look out of windows or anything to see if Dave had left, but I also did not hear him leaving. The back door was near the stairs in the kitchen, so I was hoping that he would leave that way. But when the cops got there, they found him still inside the basement and he was arrested. I was told that he was on drugs, and that might have explained his strange behavior. I really don't know what his plans were. I'm just glad that he didn't try to hurt me or anything. Something really strange happened a couple of months ago. It all started one seemingly average night. I live with my wife in a house that's in a pretty typical neighborhood. Normally, things are quiet around here as well. So we went to bed and were sleeping, when suddenly I was awoken in the middle of the night. I heard a knocking on the front door to our house. I looked at the clock, and it was nearly 2 in the morning. Obviously, I was very confused. My wife woke up to the noises as well. After I heard the knocking again, I got out of bed and I told my wife that I was going to go and see what it was. After walking into the entry of the house, I looked out of a window and saw this random guy standing there. I really had no idea who he was. The man seemed pretty average looking for the most part. Now, looking back, this may not have been the best idea, but I decided to answer the door. I opened it up and I saw the guy standing there right in front of me. I asked him who he was and what on earth he was doing at my house at 2 o'clock in the morning. The man then responded by saying he was there from Craigslist. I was very confused because I don't even use Craigslist. He claimed that he was there to buy a TV. Well, we did not have a TV for sale either. I told him that he must be at the wrong address. The guy asked me if my name was Randy, and my name is Randy. So that kind of creeped me out a little bit. He took out his phone and showed me some text messages. The person he was texting with gave an address which was my correct address. Another text said come at about 2 a.m. This was very strange. I told the guy that I didn't know who he was texting with, but it definitely was not me. I said I had no TV for sale and somebody must be pretending to be me. The man then asked if he could come inside anyways. I said no, and I told the guy that he needed to figure out who was behind that, and I made it clear to him that I was not selling anything. Then I closed the door on him and locked it. I watched out the window and made sure that the guy left, and thankfully he did. I went back to our bedroom and I told my wife about the strange encounter. She also had no idea what that could be about either. Since then, nothing else like that has happened. It's really weird though, and I've not figured out who was behind it. I mean, why would anybody arrange to meet at 2 o'clock in the morning to buy something? That seems really odd. I think maybe the guy made those texts himself. Possibly he was going to try to break in, or see if I was gullible enough to let him in the house. I really don't know. I'm just hoping that nothing like that happens again. A few weeks ago, I was selling an old couch on Craigslist. I was not expecting much. Really, I just wanted to get rid of it because it was old and taking up space. I already had a newer and much nicer one. I live by myself in a 2-bedroom house about 20 minutes from a major city. The couch had to go, but I first wanted to see if I could get any money for it before just giving it away. I had listed the couch on Craigslist for $75 or best offer. It sat there for over a week with no action, just one text asking about it, but it never materialized. Then I lowered the price to $50. For a few days there was still nothing. I was about to just make it free when I received a text from somebody asking about it. I told them that it was still available, and the person said they were willing to come by and buy it. I agreed, and the person said her name was Gabby. So after agreeing on a time, Gabby showed up the next day. She arrived at my house and I let her in. After seeing the couch, Gabby offered me $20 for it. Now, this was obviously less than what I was asking, but I was also happy to get anything for it. I accepted her offer, and then I helped her load the couch out onto her truck, and we got it in okay. After that, she left. I was feeling good about getting rid of the couch. Well, that night I was sleeping, but suddenly woke up a little after midnight. There were these really loud banging noises. At first, I thought somebody was trying to break in. I instantly became completely awake. I heard that somebody was pounding loudly on my front door. It also sounded like possibly somebody was pounding on a window as well. There were seemingly multiple people there. Someone else may have been banging on another window too. I was too scared to look though. I just got my phone, called 911, and hid under my covers. The pounding noises were almost constant, going on for a good 5 minutes at least. Then they finally stopped. Things became extremely quiet afterwards. I didn't know if the people had broken in or were still there or what. I stayed where I was, waiting for the police. Eventually, they got there and looked around my property. However, whoever had been banging on my doors and windows had left. I didn't know what they looked like or how many people it was. I told the police what I could, but they couldn't do much other than tell me to call again if they returned. After that, the people thankfully did not return. To this day, I don't know who it was or what they were doing banging on my house. I personally think it had something to do with Gabby, who bought my couch. Now, I could obviously be wrong. I have no proof, so I'm not accusing her. But I've never experienced anything like that, and the same day she goes to my house, this happens. Maybe it's just a coincidence, who knows? I'm just hoping that nothing like that ever happens again. This happened 2 years ago now. I'm a female and live alone in an apartment building. Like many people, I have an Instagram page that I post on pretty regularly. I would say I post on average at least once a month. I enjoy posting pictures on Instagram, but I know that occasionally you have to deal with a bot or a creepy person. For the most part, I hadn't had any bad experiences until this happened. One day I opened the Instagram app and saw that I had a direct message. It was from one of my followers, a guy named Tim. I didn't know him, and I didn't follow him either. I'm not sure how long he had been following me for, but he sent me a message asking if I could come and hang out with him. I found this to be kind of weird and did not respond. I mean, he didn't even have a conversation with me, and I didn't know him. He couldn't possibly expect me to just say yes. And based on his profile picture, I wasn't interested in him. I figured that he wouldn't message me again after that. But the next day, he sent me another message. He once more asked me to hang out with him and said that he could pick me up. This time, I responded and said, "No thanks, I appreciate the offer though." Now he had to understand that I wasn't interested. Tim then tried to convince me, but I ignored him. I didn't really know why he was sending me these messages, seemingly out of nowhere. The next day, I didn't get any more messages from him. I figured that he would stop communicating with me at that point. The following night, I went grocery shopping after work. I would go shopping occasionally here and there whenever I needed to. I didn't have a particular routine or anything. I was inside of the store shopping for about 20 minutes. The time was probably about 8 p.m. or so. After I was done shopping, I headed out to my car in the parking lot. By now, it was mostly quiet, but there were a few people here and there. I got all the way to my vehicle, only to see that there was a car parked next to me. I started to take my groceries out of the cart and put them in my car. That's when the door opened to the car next to me and a guy got out. I did not recognize him. He just seemed like another guy going shopping, but he didn't walk to the store and instead headed straight for me. At first, I was confused, but he then said my name and asked me why I thought I could ignore him. I realized that it was Tim from Instagram, and I did recognize him from his picture at that point. I was too confused to say anything though. He said that he was here now, and we were together, so we may as well hang out. I finally spoke and asked him what he was doing and how he knew I would be here. He claimed that it was a coincidence. I finished putting my groceries in my car and said that I had to get home. I closed my trunk and then tried to walk around him to my driver's door, but he stopped me by grabbing my arm. He told me to come on and go with him. I asked him to let me go and said that he was hurting my arm, but he started to pull me away towards his car. He was a lot stronger than I was, and we started moving towards his vehicle. Then I started yelling as loud as I could. I was yelling help and telling him to let me go. There were luckily a few people that were walking to their cars in the parking lot a ways away. They took notice of what was going on though, and when Tim saw this, he let me go and told me to shut up. I instantly ran around my car for the driver's door and got inside. Tim followed me, but I locked the door before he could get in. I didn't waste any time, and I drove out of there. Tim had to run back to his car, and I left the parking lot extremely fast. By the time he started his car, I had already left. I went around another nearby store that was out of his sight. Then I took some random residential roads until I was sure he wasn't following me. After that, I drove home. I was so focused on not letting him follow me that I forgot to call the police for a while, but eventually I did. I told him everything that happened, but when I got to my Instagram page, his account was gone. I think he deleted it. Still, after that night, I never saw Tim or heard from him again. This happened to me when I was in college. It was during my second year at my university. I lived in a small house which I shared with my roommate Thomas. The university I went to is rather large, and I think has about 20,000 total students. This took place sometime during the first semester. I remember that one day I went on Instagram and saw that I had a new follower. I clicked on the profile, and it was a girl named Rhonda. She had my school initials in her profile, as well as what I assumed would be her graduating year. She was also followed by two people that I knew from college. None of my really close friends, but some guys that I knew who they were and followed them. I realized that Rhonda must have went to my school, and I followed her back. On her profile, she didn't have too many pictures, a few selfies and some pictures of her dog. That was about it. After following her back, I went on with things and didn't think much of it. A few days went by. Then, one day, I noticed that Rhonda liked all of my pictures on Instagram. Now, I had about 40 posts or so, dating all the way back to my early years of high school. She liked every single photo, and I found that nice, but also a little bit random and odd. I thought that maybe she liked me or something. She didn't comment on anything or send me any messages though. Now, several more days went by after this. Then one night, Thomas was studying at a classroom and I was at home by myself. There was then a knock on the door. It was probably about 9 o'clock at night, and I wasn't expecting anybody and had no clue as to who it was. I had been in my room, so I didn't hear the knock very well. I got up and went out into the hallway, and then I heard another knock. But I realized then that the knocking was coming from the back door of the house, not even the front door. Now this was really strange. I walked over to the back door and looked out the window. When I did, I saw a girl standing there. It was Rhonda, but at first I didn't recognize her because I had only seen some selfies of her on Instagram. I don't think that I had ever seen her in person before. As I was standing by the door, she tried opening it up. Then I opened up the back door and said hi to her. I then asked her what she was doing here. She asked me if she could come inside. I had a bad feeling about it. Something about her was sort of creeping me out. Maybe it was the fact that she showed up unannounced to my back door at 9 o'clock at night, and by the way, she had no way of knowing where I lived. I asked her how she knew where my house was. She just asked to come inside again. I really didn't want her to. So instead, I told her that I was really busy with homework and I had to get back to it. She just stood there for a moment looking disappointed. Then she said that she was just going to go and walked off sort of angrily. I was glad that she was going, but more confused than anything. After she left, I went back inside and went into my room. Then I blocked Rhonda on Instagram. I felt that she had crossed the line by showing up unannounced like that. When Thomas got back home, I asked him if he knew Rhonda at all. He said no. I showed him her picture and he still didn't recognize her. I told him what happened and he was just as confused as I was. I was hoping that maybe he had known Rhonda and she asked him for the address or something. But the fact that he didn't made it that much more creepy and weird. The very next night, I was pulling a late night session of homework. I had some stuff due at 11:59 p.m. I was trying to get it done at the last moment. It was probably like 11:30 and I was almost done when I heard Thomas call me from the living room. He was in there watching TV and I asked him what he wanted. Then he told me that there was a girl standing at the front door. I knew who it was. I got up and walked out into the living room. I looked out the front door to see Rhonda just standing there, but she didn't knock on the door or anything. She appeared to look over and notice me. Then she turned and ran off. It was the creepiest thing ever. I went back and finished my homework and then joined Thomas watching TV in the living room. We kept glancing out the windows to see if she would come back, but luckily she didn't. After that, I never saw her again. I remember I asked Thomas to look her up on Instagram months later in the school year. She had a few more pictures then, and appeared to still attend our university. I still don't know what she was doing. It was really creepy behavior though. This is my scariest experience of being at home by myself. It happened back when I was 12 years old. It was a long time ago now, but I still remember it really well. During this time, I lived with my parents, older sister, and younger brother. It was very rare that I would be at home by myself, but somehow it happened. It was a Friday evening, and my dad was out of town until the next morning for work. He didn't travel for work a whole lot, but every now and then he did. I remember that my sister was at her best friend's house and was going to be sleeping over there. As for my mom and brother, they were at a birthday party my brother was invited to. I was not invited, and my mom went with my brother because she was basically helping the birthday kid's mom with the party. So that left me home alone, all by myself on a Friday night. My big plans were to just relax and play video games. I was excited about it though, because I rarely got the entire place to myself. Our house was pretty average for the most part. There were 2 levels, with all the bedrooms being upstairs. Downstairs was the living room, dining room, and kitchen. So after my mom left that afternoon shortly after I got back from school, she gave me instructions on how to make a frozen pizza. I had never cooked before, but I loved frozen pizza, and at about 7 p.m. I cooked it. Everything went pretty well, and then I went into the living room and sat in an office chair right in front of the TV and started playing on my PlayStation. This went on for several hours. At about 9 o'clock at night, I heard the sound of somebody stepping onto the front step where our door was. The living room was at the front of the house, so it really wasn't that far away. When I heard the person walk onto the front step, I assumed that it was my mom and brother returning from the birthday party. I kept playing, expecting to hear the door open at any point. But after several minutes went by, nothing happened. Nobody entered the house. I got curious, and I got up and walked over to the front door to look outside. When I did, I didn't see anybody there. There was no one at the front door, and my mom's car was not in the driveway either. As I was looking there though, something caught my eye to the left. I looked and saw what appeared to be a man walking through the front yard. He was just barely in my sight for about a second before disappearing past what I could see. He had gone towards the side of the house, or maybe the neighbor's yard, I was a little nervous after this, but I assumed that the man had left. I didn't really know who he was or what he was doing. I kept watching around the front yard for a minute or so and saw nothing more. So after that, I returned to my video games. I couldn't help but be creeped out by what I had seen, so I was trying to take my mind off of it. And after about 10 minutes, it was starting to work. That is, until suddenly I heard the sound of somebody trying to open the back door to the house. Our back door was connected to the kitchen and went out to the patio. This sound was much louder, and I instantly stood up. I ran over to the phone and called my mom's number. During this time, I didn't hear any more noises. I told my mom that somebody tried coming in the back door, and she told me to call the police. She told me that she would be home as soon as she could, but the birthday party was still going on. So after that, I quickly ran upstairs and then went into my bedroom. Once I was there, I called the police and told them that I thought somebody was trying to break in. After giving them my address, I went and hid behind my bed. I covered myself with tons of blankets. I was really too scared to want to know what was going on. As I waited for the police to arrive, I was hoping that the man had just left and not tried breaking in. I wasn't hearing anything, but then again, I was covered in blankets. It felt like forever, but maybe 10 minutes later, the police got there. I remember that I got a call on the phone and was told that they were there. I never would have gone down and left my bedroom on my own. When that happened, I got up, but heard people talking, so I stayed in my bedroom. I remember a while later, there was a knock at my bedroom door. I was terrified until I heard a voice on the other side say police. Then I answered the door and there was an officer there. He told me that they had caught a man who had just broken in. I was told that the police got there in the nick of time, and they really did. The man had somehow got the back door to the house open. He had literally just entered when the police arrived. The man was arrested, and luckily didn't get far into the house. I was honestly shocked when I heard it, but luckily everything turned out fine. He wasn't able to steal anything or do any damage. The back door needed a little bit of fixing, but it wasn't a huge deal. After that though, I didn't want to stay home by myself for a while. One time, I got back from work a little bit later at night. I lived alone in an apartment on the second floor during this time. After getting back home, I changed and then went into the living room. I was sitting on the couch eating when I heard this loud noise coming from next door. It sounded like the next door neighbor was banging on the wall. It was extremely loud and went on for almost a minute. I was really confused when I heard this. I wasn't making any loud noises or anything. The TV was on, but the volume was really not that high at all. But yet the neighbor was pounding on the wall as if I was being really noisy and he wanted me to be quiet. I didn't really know why else he would be banging on the wall like that. And even if he was bothered by the TV, I didn't even think it was loud enough for my neighbor to be able to hear it. I wasn't hearing any other loud noises from anywhere else. Just to be sure though, I muted the television. For a short time, everything was quiet. But then, the loud banging on the wall started up again. I really had no idea why my neighbor would be doing this. I wasn't aware of making them angry or anything. And to be honest, I didn't even know who my next door neighbor was on that side. I never really saw them. I had been living in my apartment for like 6 months, but I had never met or seen hardly any of my neighbors. The banging stopped after a short time. I didn't know what to make of this, but for the next couple of minutes, everything was quiet, so I just kind of moved on from that. Except, about 5 minutes later, there was suddenly a loud knocking coming from my front door. It seemed as though whoever had been banging on my wall had now moved to my front door. After it continued for about 30 straight seconds, I decided to get up. I walked over to the door, and when I approached, the banging stopped. I looked through my peephole to the other side, but nobody was there. Whoever had been knocking had now left, and I had no idea who it was. I was just assuming that it was my next door neighbor, but I didn't even know what they looked like. I considered going over there and asking them what the deal was, but I decided not to. Based on how hard they were pounding on the walls and door, I just had a bad feeling about it. So instead, I just moved on again and tried to ignore it. I was hoping that there would be no more banging on my walls or door that night, and luckily there wasn't. So the next day, when I was leaving for work, I walked out of my apartment and went down the hallway. There was an elevator and a set of stairs right next to it. Now, I was always in the habit of just taking the stairs, and I very rarely used the elevator. So after walking down the hallway, I had passed by my next door neighbor's door. A moment later, I heard the door open. This was the same neighbor who had seemingly been banging on the walls and my door last night. I remembered the previous night, but I just kept walking. When I made it to the stairs and started to go down, I heard whoever it was walking behind me. The stairs turned, and I went around the corner and glanced up. I saw a man walking down the stairs, but I did not directly look at him. But apparently, that was the guy who lived next to me. After walking down the stairs, I went through the lobby and then left out the front door. The guy that was walking behind me did exactly the same thing. He followed me out the door and was walking behind me as I was on the sidewalk. I parked in the large parking lot that was at the complex. After getting to my vehicle, I got inside. I then saw the guy kind of standing there and looking in my direction. He was about 50 feet away, and I didn't know what his deal was. He just stood there as I drove off and went to work. I had never seen that guy before, but I guess that was my next door neighbor. So I worked that day, and when I arrived home afterwards, it was a little bit later at night once again. By the time I arrived back, I think that it was about 10 o'clock. So I went inside of my apartment building and then walked up the stairs. When I made it to the top, I walked down the hallway towards my door. Right after I passed by my next door neighbor's door, I heard it opening again. I just had a bad feeling, and I walked faster to get to my door. I heard his footsteps enter the hallway. When I arrived at my front door, I quickly unlocked it and opened it up. As I was closing the door behind me, I heard the footsteps still approaching. I closed and locked my door, and probably 5 seconds later, my neighbor actually tried opening it. Then, there was once again more really loud banging coming from the other side of it. I really couldn't believe this guy. I looked out and saw him relentlessly pounding at my front door. I moved away from it then, and was about to call the police. I went and got my phone, but then he stopped. At that point, I put the phone down. I didn't want to get in some war with my next door neighbor. Clearly, he had some problems with me, and he had tried entering my apartment, but I also didn't know if maybe it was just a misunderstanding or something. I decided that if I heard any more banging on the door or walls or anything, I was going to go over and give him a piece of my mind, and hopefully he wasn't dangerous. But after that, nothing else happened. So I would say about a week later, one day I saw another neighbor in the hallway. I went over and introduced myself to her. I had seen her a couple of times before and knew that she lived here. I told her about what happened and asked her if she knew the guy who lived next to me. She told me that nobody lived there, and the apartment had been vacant for a while. This was crazy to hear. I then went to the offices of the apartment complex and asked one of the agents. They confirmed that the unit next to mine was vacant and had been for several weeks. My mind was blown after hearing that. I never saw that guy again or heard anything else. I don't live there anymore, but I still get the creeps thinking back to that. This happened just last year. I live alone in a house with 2 floors and 3 bedrooms total. One of the bedrooms I use as a guest room, and the other as my home office. So one night, I got home from work. It was maybe like 7 p.m. or so, I would say. After arriving back, I went inside and then started to cook some food. The kitchen was at the back center of my house. I listened to the radio as I was cooking, and it took me maybe 30 minutes. When I was done, I decided to go upstairs and change and then go back down to eat. So I walked upstairs and was going to my bedroom, but I noticed that the door to the guest bedroom was closed. I always left the doors open, and I didn't recall closing it. This was really strange to me, so I went over and opened up the door and took a step inside. The lights were off, but before I could reach the light switch, I saw something. There was a woman standing in the back side of the room and looking at me. It was really dark in there, so I didn't get a good look at her at all, but after about a second, she started to charge at me. I stepped back and closed the door and then ran back down the hallway. When I made it to the stairs, I heard the woman opening the bedroom door. I didn't have any time to think and guess why there was a random woman in my house and why she was now chasing after me. After going down the stairs, I really wasn't thinking at all. I don't know why, but I ran to the door next to it, which led to the basement. Then I went in there and closed the door behind me. I was standing at the top of the stairs, and it was completely dark down there, and I guess I thought that it would be a good hiding place. When I was there, I heard the woman go down the stairs, but then she seemed to turn and go in another direction, instead of heading towards the basement. I started to feel just slightly better. I took out my phone to call the police, and when I did, it lit up the surrounding area of where I was. I was standing at the top of the stairs still, and I saw that there appeared to be a man standing in the basement at the bottom of the stairs, and he was walking towards me. When I saw this, I opened the door back up and left the basement. Then I just ran for the front door. I honestly don't know where the woman was, but thankfully I did not see her. I left the house and ran for my car. Once there, I got inside and called the police. I then drove away from my house and did not come back until the cops were there. When the police got there, they went inside my house and were able to locate both the woman and the man. The crime couple was arrested. I'm not sure how, but they were able to get inside of my house. There was no sign of a break-in, so I never found out where they entered. Maybe I left a door unlocked, but I really don't know. Apparently, they both entered together though, and for some reason, the woman hid upstairs and the man hid downstairs. I'm not sure if I surprised them by getting home or what. I think they were planning on robbing me. That was by far the scariest moment of my life though. I still live in the house, but since then, I've taken just about every security measure there is, and hopefully nothing like that ever happens again. I'm a 29-year-old female, and I live with my husband in a house. Our neighborhood is pretty standard for the most part, and this happened about 1.5 years ago. I worked pretty normal hours then, but my husband's hours are more random. On this night, I recall that he was working late. It was probably sometime after 8 p.m., and I remember that I was in the living room. I was FaceTiming my sister and young nephew. The three of us were talking until her son had to go to bed, and then I hung up. At that point, I recall looking out the front window and noticing a car starting to pull into our driveway. A couple of things struck me as odd about this though. For one, it was not my husband's vehicle, and he wasn't supposed to be home yet. And for two, the vehicle's lights were off as it entered the driveway. Now our driveway is somewhat long and goes up to the garage. The garage is out of sight of the house though because it connects to it. So the car ended up slowing down and then just barely going out of my sight and parking. I kept watching and was now listening as well, but I didn't hear anybody getting out or anything. I called my husband and let him know what was going on. I was hoping that maybe this was one of his friends or something, but he had no clue as to who that would be and said that he would leave work as soon as possible. After hanging up with him, I wasn't really sure what to do. I then walked over to the dining room, which had a window that looked out to the backyard. It was very dark back there as well. But when I looked, I saw what appeared to be a man walking out from behind the garage and into the backyard. When I saw this, I left the room and dialed 911. I told the operator my address and told him the situation of what was going on. I was told that police were on the way. After that, I was walking through the living room when I suddenly heard the sound of glass breaking. It sounded like the dining room window was being smashed. I ran the rest of the way to the bedroom and then closed the door behind me and locked it. I moved into the bedroom closet and shut the door there as well. Now that I was there, I really couldn't hear too much. Several minutes went by and I thought that I was in the clear, but then I heard footsteps in the hallway. When that happened, I held my breath. The man got closer and closer and didn't go into any other rooms. It seemed as though he was heading straight for the bedroom that I was in. He then tried opening the door, which was locked. When it didn't open, there was a very loud bang at the door. Perhaps the man was trying to break the door down by hitting it with something. Then, after another loud bang, I heard police sirens in the distance. This caused the man to move away from the door and go back down the hallway. Within a minute, police were out front of the house. I didn't hear much more until I was sure that the cops were there. Then I left the bedroom and went out into the hallway. The police had found the man leaving through the backyard, and luckily he was caught. The man had in fact broken the glass to the dining room, but nothing in the house was really messed up other than the window. I'm not sure what the guy's plan was, but I'm really grateful that the police got there when they did. This took place back when I was a kid. I believe that I was 10 years old or so. This was in the late 90s, and during this time, I would ride the bus home from school. It would drop me off at the corner, not far from my house. Then I would walk a short distance on the sidewalk and go inside. We lived in a pretty standard neighborhood in the suburbs, and when I would arrive back home from school, both of my parents would still be gone at work. I had been trusted to be home by myself since I was 9 years old, and I didn't mind it. But in the afternoons, I would usually only be by myself for about 2 or 3 hours. I would just hang around the house and do homework or watch TV usually. So one time I got home from school like always. I was by myself, and it was maybe about 15 minutes or so after I got back home. I was in the living room when there was a knock at the front door. I looked over, and from where I was, I could tell that somebody was there, but I couldn't see who they were. Back then, I was a shy kid, and I didn't want the person at the door to see me, so I ducked down. The person at the door then knocked again. I was curious, so I carefully moved to a window and looked out to see who it was. There was a man there, but I did not recognize him, and he was just standing at the front step. After knocking twice, the guy then tried opening the door, which was locked. Then, he finally walked away. I thought that this was really weird. I watched him cut through the front yard and then go out of sight, heading towards the sidewalk. It was very confusing why this guy would be here. I was thinking that he had to be at the wrong house or something. I really couldn't think of any other possible explanation. But after the guy left, I moved on and forgot about it. It was certainly strange and a bit creepy, but it didn't seem that bad to me. My parents ended up getting home later, and everything was fine. But the very next day, I saw the man again. I remember that I rode the bus home, and I got dropped off. Shortly after I stepped off the bus, I remember noticing the guy. He was a long ways away, but walking down the sidewalk. I found it strange to see him here again, because until the previous day, I had never seen him before. I was not aware of him living in the area or anything like that. So I tried to hurry up, and I walked quickly to my house. Then I unlocked the door and went inside. Once I was in, I felt safe, and I didn't really think that the man would do anything. But maybe 5 minutes later, there was a knock at the door again. I looked and saw that the same guy was back. Obviously, I was not going to answer the door. I tried to stay hidden from the view of the man. This time, he only knocked once, and again he tried opening the door. But after that, I saw him start to walk away. It was pretty much the same thing as the day before, and I saw him go out of my sight. This time, though, I was more creeped out because of the fact that he was here 2 days in a row. Plus, he saw me walk to the house, so there was no mistaking it. But for the next hour or so, nothing else strange happened. I was just hanging out in the living room. Then I decided to go out and water some of the flowers in the backyard. I went to the back of the house where the kitchen was, and then left out the back door. I took 2 steps into the backyard and saw the guy coming out from behind a bush. He was walking towards me. I ran back inside as fast as I could, and the man started running after me. I closed the door and locked it just in the nick of time. He nearly stopped me. He tried getting in, but couldn't. I ran out of the room and went to the phone in the living room. I dialed 911 and asked for police to come to my address. The man ran away at that point, though. I was glad he was gone. The police got there a while later and searched the entire property as well as the neighborhood. However, The man was long gone by then. There was a bit of an investigation done. I don't really remember much else, other than a neighbor about a block away remembered seeing a work van parked on the side of the road. They didn't know whose it was, and it was thought that maybe that was the guy's vehicle. After that, though, he never came back. I'm really glad that I was all right. I will never forget that. Several years ago, I got this apartment in the city. It was a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom place. I lived on the 2nd floor and towards the end of the hallway. When I moved in, I never really saw any of the neighbors in the building, and it was mostly quiet. Well, one day after living there for about a month, I got a friend request on Facebook from a seemingly random guy. I did not recognize him or know who he was, and we did not have any mutual friends, so I declined his friend request. The next day, he sent me another friend request, this time with a message telling me that he was my next-door neighbor. I accepted the request this time, not knowing who he was. I told him that I didn't know that and I had never seen him. He said something like that was fine. So I remember that after that, I was a little bit confused as to how he had found me, because I had literally never seen this guy at all, and I didn't know how he would know my name and find me on Facebook. But overall, I didn't really give that much thought to it. As the next few weeks went by, I never saw the guy out in the hallways or anything, but he occasionally would message me on Facebook. He would randomly ask me what I was doing, or he would ask me how my job was, things like that. At first, I thought he was just a nice or friendly guy, but eventually it seemed a little weird. I think it was just because of how random the times when he would message me were, and his replies were also a little bit strange, and he would ask me questions like he had known me for years, and mention things that I didn't know how he knew. Like one time, I went home to my parents for the weekend. Later on when I was back, he asked me if I had gone to my parents. I really didn't know how he knew that. He told me that he just guessed, but it seemed weird. One night though, things took a really crazy turn. It was really late and I was just going to bed. At probably 11 p.m., I saw that he sent me a message. It said, "What are you doing?" I was tired and did not bother to open it or respond. Instead, I just got ready for bed and then went to sleep. But as I was trying to fall asleep, I heard my phone vibrating several more times from notifications. I got curious and I looked at it to see several more messages from my neighbor. He was saying things like, "I know you're home," and "I need you to answer me now." He always seemed kind of strange, but never texted like this before. I responded asking if he was okay and what was going on. He told me that he wanted to come over, and I said that I was really tired and I was going to sleep. I asked him if anything was wrong, and he said no, he just wanted to come over. I told him no, I was busy, and then I put my phone down, but he kept sending me more and more messages. I turned my notifications off, knowing that he was just going to keep sending me stuff. Then I ignored it and I went to bed. However, not long after this, I woke up to the sound of banging on my door. It was my neighbor, and I saw on Facebook that he sent me at least 20 more messages demanding to be let in. He was loudly knocking on the door and trying to open it. I went over to the door and yelled from the other side that if he didn't leave, I was going to call the cops. He still didn't leave though. Instead, he just demanded that I let him in. So I called 911 and told them what was happening. The man stayed at my door and continued knocking and asking me to let him in. I obviously did not. When the police arrived, he was still there. I heard him arguing with police, and eventually he tried fighting one of the cops and got arrested. I'm pretty sure that the guy was crazy or else on drugs. I don't know why he acted like that, but I'm glad that I didn't open the door for him or anything. I live in a quiet neighborhood with my wife. Our community has a group page on Facebook that many residents are in. The page is used to post any news in the community, and anybody can post there. Sometimes people will post things like animals seen in their backyards, or that they're having a yard sale. Other times, things like community events are posted there, or possibly pictures of the weather. But every now and then, if suspicious activity or crimes happen, that's where people post about it. However, that's been pretty rare, because our area has always been considered to be pretty safe. In the years that I've been a part of the Facebook group, the craziest crimes I remember was when a police chase cut through the town once, or another time somebody's garage got broken into. Well, one morning I went onto the Facebook page and saw a post that was concerning. It was talking about some possible carjacking attempts and suspicious characters seen near the golf course. When I read the post, it talked of a man who lurked on the side of a certain street next to the woods. The man apparently walked out in front of somebody's car once and tried pulling open the door and then tried breaking the window. The driver was able to get away and called the police. However, when they got there, they did not find the man. Another time, less than a week later, a man was seen in that same general spot, just looking at people standing by the side of the road, and then he went into the woods. He was described as having longer brown hair and a short beard. This was especially concerning to me because our backyard is very large and goes all the way to that very same spot, so technically the guy would have been standing on my property. So the woods that he had come out of was our woods. You see, we have 5 acres, and most of the woods is going directly back behind our house. There's so much of it that we never really go far into them. I rarely go to that part of my property, and the end of the woods is the street that the people were talking about, and right across from that street is a golf course. When I heard about this, I decided to go out into the woods and look around. I hadn't been back there in a while. We have a small path through the first part of the woods, but I would say at least 90% of it is all wildland that I rarely walk through. I went out into the woods and it soon became pretty dense. After wandering around there for like 30 minutes, I hadn't seen or heard anything strange, so I went back inside after that. We were not sure why a man would be hanging out in that area, and we didn't know who it could possibly be either. Well, that very same night, my wife and I were at home. I was in the living room watching TV with my wife, and she got up to get something in the kitchen. It was probably like 10 p.m. or so. Most of our lights were off, and when my wife got into the kitchen, I remember her announcing that something triggered the light in the backyard. We have a motion detecting light in the backyard for the smaller area that's not the woods, which is a grass area and our patio. Both of us assumed it to be an animal, most likely a deer. So I got up and headed into the kitchen to see what it could be. However, we did not see anything for several moments. That is, until we saw a man walking out of the woods and into our yard. I knew right then and there that this had to be the same guy that people had been talking about. We watched from our window as the guy walked around our yard. I thought about opening a window and yelling at him, but I didn't. We moved back as the man walked closer to our house. We didn't really think he could see us because our lights back there were off, but I wasn't sure. That's when I got out my phone and dialed 911. The guy then walked over to our back door and tried opening it. Thankfully, it was locked. He then walked back out into the yard and eventually over to our shed in the corner of the backyard. Then he went inside of it. I told police that the man was hiding inside of our shed. They did not take long to respond and got there just minutes later. They went to the shed and tried to get the man to come out for a while. There were several things in there that he could use as a weapon. After probably almost 20 minutes, eventually they got the guy to come out of the shed. I learned that just a little bit before we had seen him in our backyard, he had tried to carjack somebody else on that same road before taking off into the woods. The police were already called about that incident. That must have been why they got there so fast, and that also must have been why he was trying to get inside of our house and then hid inside of the shed. I'm glad that my wife noticed the light coming on and that we saw him. If not, he maybe could have gotten away with it. Looking back, it makes me wonder if the guy had been living in our woods for a while or something. I'm not sure why he chose that spot, but he had been seen there multiple times. It was very creepy. This is something that happened back when I was a freshman in high school. I'm also a female, and this was about 10 years ago now. So the story begins when I got this friend request from a random guy on Facebook. I looked at his profile and saw that he appeared to be around my age, and we did have a couple of mutual friends. His profile said he went to a different high school, but it was one that was nearby in just the next city over from mine. I accepted the friend request because of this, and I was also slightly curious of how the guy knew about me. For the most part, he looked like a pretty typical kid though. Not long after I accepted his friend request, he sent me a message saying hi. I said hi back to him, and we started having a basic conversation. I don't recall everything said, but the conversation continued into the next day. I remember that's when he asked me if I wanted to hang out with him. Now, I had only just met him, and we went to different schools. He seemed nice to that point from talking, and I almost said yes, but then I ended up saying no at that point because I just didn't know him well enough yet. He said maybe some other time, and I said yes to that, but not making any official plans. For the rest of that day and into the next, we continued to talk on and off. Well, the next day, later on, after I got home from school, he told me that he was going to come to my house and pick me up. Once more, I did not feel comfortable to hang out with the guy yet. I told him that I would not be able to, but he didn't respond to me for a while. About 20 minutes later or so, he told me to come outside, saying that he was there. I got a bad feeling about it, and also realized now that this guy must be at least 16 years old if he was driving around. I walked over to the front of the house and saw that there was a car parked out on the side of the street. It was a red 4-door sedan that was kind of old looking. However, the windows were rather tinted and I could not see inside. I was really surprised that he had driven all the way to my house. At first, I felt kind of bad for him to drive all that way and not hang out with him. We had been talking for a few days and most likely he wouldn't be a bad guy. So I almost walked outside and got into his car. But my parents were also home, and I would have to tell them where I was going, and I didn't think they would want me to go with this guy. After thinking about it for a minute or two, I decided not to go. When I said maybe we'd hang out another time, I didn't mean just drive to my house. He texted me on Facebook a couple more times, urging me to go outside already. I told him that I had some other place to go though, which wasn't true, but I didn't know what else to say. Eventually, he said okay, and he drove off. After he left though, I got the realization that I never told him my address. It sort of creeped me out that he knew where I lived. I didn't know how he would know this. We did have mutual friends on Facebook, so possibly he knew one of my friends and asked them. Either way, I was much less comfortable even talking with this guy anymore. However, despite that very same night he continued to send me messages. I remember that this was several hours later, probably 9 or 10 at night. He asked me where I was and what I was doing. I told him that I was just in my room doing homework, which I was. After that, he did not respond right away. I don't remember what assignment I was doing, but I was pretty focused on it. I sat at my desk in the corner of my bedroom. About 20 minutes later though, I heard this car driving down the street slowly outside. My bedroom was at the front end of the house, and I could see out to the street. We also lived in a pretty quiet neighborhood, and at this hour, it was rare for somebody to drive past. So hearing a car driving slowly just got my attention for some reason. I remember lifting up the blinds and glancing out the window. When I did, I saw this car moving very slowly and sort of pulling over to the side of the street, across from our house and a little ways down. That's when I realized this was the same red car with the tinted windows. I looked back to Facebook, but there were still no new messages. He hadn't told me that he was coming over again, and he didn't tell me to come outside either. I was expecting him to tell me again that he was there and to go with him like before, but he didn't. As the car continued to just sit there outside on the side of the street running, I kept an eye on it. After several more minutes, the driver's door opened. I saw a man get out, but it wasn't some 16-year-old kid. It was a grown man, probably like 40. He got out and started walking in the direction of our house. At this point, I quickly got up and ran out of my bedroom. I went towards the living room, and luckily my parents were both still up and in the living room. I didn't have time to tell them the whole story, but I alerted them of the guy walking. My dad got up and went over to the door. I looked through the front window, and by now the man was walking on the side of the street towards our house. My dad went over to the front door and opened it. When he did, the man kept walking farther away down the street, in the opposite direction of his car. My dad actually went outside and followed the guy, calling for him to stop. But at that point, the guy took off running. My dad did not run after him and came back inside. That's when I told my parents the whole story of how I thought I was talking to a kid my age, and also how he just showed up without me giving him my address. My parents called the police at that point, and my dad went and stood outside in the front door, seeing if the guy would head back for his car because it was still there. When the police arrived, the man was still nowhere in sight. They spoke with us, and then went out and looked for the man. He had to show up eventually because of his car, and when he did, the police got him. After that, I learned a valuable lesson about Facebook and social media. I was much more careful with who I talked to online for the rest of my high school career. I don't go on Facebook that much, but I do go on from time to time, and last year something really strange happened. One day I went on Facebook for the first time in probably a couple of weeks. When I did, I saw that I had one new friend request and clicked on it to see who it was. The person appeared to have the same exact profile as me. They had the same name as me and the same profile picture. It was like they were pretending to be me. I clicked on the profile, assuming it to probably be a bot, but this was really strange. There was not a whole lot that I could see right away on the page, so I accepted the friend request to see more. After I did, I saw that this person pretending to be me had posted several of the same pictures that I had on my page, but this profile only had one friend, which was now me. I was still thinking that it was a bot of some sort, and this was really weird. I sent a message to the person saying, "What's the meaning of this?" They responded back rather quickly, saying exactly what I had said to them. "What's the meaning of this?" I asked who it was, and they wrote back the same thing, just imitating what I said. It was really weird. I figured at this point that it was probably some kind of a prank. I got off of Facebook and texted a few of my friends about it. However, when I did, none of my friends admitted to it and didn't seem to know what was going on. I know my friends pretty well, and they all seemed genuinely confused. The next day, I was really curious as to who it was, so I went back on and sent another message to the page. This time, hoping that it was a joke somebody was playing on me for some reason, I said, "This is a funny joke, but seriously, who are you?" The page responded just saying, "This is not a joke." They finally said something other than just what I had said to them. I asked them to stop pretending to be me, saying that it was really weird. They responded saying, "Okay, I will just take your account then." I didn't know what they meant by this, but I was annoyed and I blocked the page right then and there. I thought that was that. The next day, however, I got a Facebook notification randomly saying that several people had liked my photo. I hadn't posted anything lately, so I went on to see. That's when I realized that my account had been hacked. There was a picture posted to my account. It was my profile picture, but put through several filters, and it looked really weird. Whoever was behind this said they would hack my account, and they did. I really couldn't believe it. I quickly deleted the post and then changed my password. I hadn't told my previous password to anyone, so I don't know how they would have even known it. After that, I didn't go on Facebook for a long time, and also strangely, the person never hacked into my account again or sent me another friend request or message. I still don't know who did that or why. It's very mysterious. I am a 26-year-old female. Earlier this year, I met up with one of my best friends, Courtney. It was a Friday night and we went to a local village. Next to the center of town, there were some restaurants, and there was also a park with live music being played. We had made reservations to the restaurant, but got there about an hour early to walk around and enjoy the night. It was very nice weather that evening, and lots of other people were out. Courtney and I walked over to the concert, and there was a bit of a crowd standing nearby. We hung out there for a while until it was time for our dinner reservations. While we were over there, I took a picture of Courtney and I and posted it to my Snapchat story. We later went to a nearby restaurant and then walked around the plaza. After we left, we each went home. Now, after arriving back to my apartment, I saw that I had a few Snapchat notifications. One of them in particular caught my eye. A guy who I did not know responded to my story. He responded to the picture of Courtney and I and said, "I was behind you guys." I did not have any clue as to who this guy was, and I did not even remember becoming friends with him on Snapchat. I realized that he must have recognized us though, and also been at the concert thing. I responded with something like, "Oh, haha, that's funny." He then said something like, "Yes, I was watching you the whole time." I was a little bit creeped out by this response, but hoped and assumed that he was just joking. I did not respond. However, the man then sent another message a very short time later. I looked, and he asked where I was going next weekend and said that he would watch us then too. I asked the man who he even was. I was wondering why and when I became friends with him on Snapchat. The man did not respond, but left me on read. After that, I blocked him. I then started talking to Courtney and telling her of the situation. Courtney said that the guy had also sent her some Snapchats that same night. She also mentioned how he was being creepy, and she too did not know who he was. After that, she blocked him as well. I remember that for a few days, and the next time I saw Courtney, I was a little bit paranoid. Luckily, nothing strange has happened since, except I never saw what the guy looked like, and I still don't know. I'm not sure if he was actually at the concert thing and watching us, or if he was just saying that on Snapchat. I honestly don't know why. I'm just hoping that I never encounter him again. This happened last year and still creeps me out when I think of it. So I was at home one night by myself. I was just in my bedroom scrolling through my phone. All of a sudden, I saw this Snapchat notification from a name that I did not recognize. I was curious, so I went to Snapchat and opened the snap to see. It was a selfie of what appeared to be a man. However, this photo was taken extremely close to his face, and he also appeared to be in a very dark room. I could barely see his face at all, and didn't recognize it to be anybody that I knew. The picture honestly looked very creepy. There was no words with the picture, and that was it. I guess at some point, I must have become friends with this guy. I didn't know when though. I had Snapchat for probably 10 years. I did not send a picture back, but instead typed a message for the guy, asking who he was. Then he sent another photo. When I opened it, I saw that it was much like the one before. It was honestly so creepy. I wish I would have screenshotted it, but I didn't. I thought that maybe the person sent a picture like this by mistake, but after the second one, I realized that it was not. I asked again who it was. The person's response, though, really shocked me. He simply said, "I'm coming over now." I thought that he had to be joking, but I also realized then that I had my location on Snapchat. I quickly went into the settings and turned my location off. If this guy was serious, I was hoping that he would not know where I was. Then I blocked the mysterious guy. I thought that was it. I returned to what I was doing, but I couldn't help but feel a little bit creeped out by the whole thing. Well, roughly 30 minutes later, there was a knock at the front door. I had a terrible feeling instantly. I think by now it was like 10-something at night. Not a normal time for somebody to come to the door. I carefully left my bedroom and went down the hallway. Eventually, I got to a window that I could look out and see who was there. When I did, I saw a man wearing a ski mask standing there. I couldn't believe it. The guy must have got my location before I had turned it off. I watched him knock on the door again. Then he started to look around. When he did, I quickly moved back and away from the window. I heard the guy walk off the step, but did not know where he was going to. The next thing I knew, I heard him right outside one of the main windows. I ran back into my bedroom and then called the police. I locked my bedroom door and covered my window. Then I just waited. I did not hear anything during this time. I wasn't sure what was going on, if he was trying to break in or maybe if he left. About 10 minutes later is when the cops arrived. They came to the front door and I told them about what happened. They offered to look around, and I almost said that they didn't have to, but I ended up saying sure. Then they looked around my backyard, and surprisingly found the man hiding in some bushes. When they located him, they asked him to come out. He ignored them and then tried to run. However, the police caught up with him before he left the yard. It was the same guy who had been Snapchatting me. I'm not sure what his plans were. I'm just glad that he was caught. For some background to the story, I'm a female and was 17 at the time. I was a senior in high school and lived with my parents. I have Snapchat and have had it since middle school actually. It was a very common way for me to talk to friends in high school. Occasionally, I would get added by random people who I didn't know. I would say it happened about every week or two. However, I never added anybody back unless I knew exactly who they were. I added some random people back when I was much younger, and some of them were kind of weird, so I stopped doing that. Well, I remember one day, I got added by some random guy on Snapchat. I did not add him back and deleted it. So I think it was the next day or else a couple days later, I got added by one of my friends from school. It was not one of my best friends, but somebody who I knew decently. I already was friends with her on Snapchat, so when I saw it, I figured that she made a new account. In high school, it was not that uncommon for people to make new accounts for various reasons. I didn't think too much of it, and I added her back. That afternoon, after I arrived home from school, I was just in my bedroom at my desk, and that same friend messaged me on Snapchat. She asked me what I was doing, and I said that I was just at home doing homework. She then told me that she was going to come over. I said okay, but it seemed a little bit odd. She had maybe come over like once or twice, but it had been a really long time. I also hadn't really hung out with her in a while. During this time, my parents were still gone at work, and I was at home by myself. About 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the front door. I assumed it to be my friend, and I was still a little bit confused that she was coming over at all. But she also did not text me on Snapchat to say that she was there or anything. So I left my bedroom, and I walked out into the living room. I soon saw that there was a random man standing on the front step. I had no idea who he was or what he was doing at my house. I decided not to answer the door. Luckily, he did not see me when I looked out of the window. I then went back to my bedroom. When I did, I saw that my friend had now messaged me on Snapchat. She told me that she was outside and asked to be let in. Now I knew what was going on. This was not my friend at all, but this man must have been pretending to be her. I instantly blocked the account. I then went back out into the living room and saw that the man was still standing there. I wasn't sure what I was going to do about it, but that's when I noticed my dad's car going down the street. He was coming back home from work. As soon as he started to pull into the driveway, the man at the front step just took off running. He left the front yard, going back out into the street. My dad came inside and mentioned how he saw a guy running from our yard. I told him what happened, and he called the cops. We talked to them when they came out, and they said that they would look into it. That man must have known my friend's name if he pretended to be her. How he even knew who I was, I do not know. My best guess is that he saw me on Facebook or Instagram or something, or maybe even in person. He must have looked at my friends list on probably Facebook to get her name and then impersonate her on Snapchat. It was crazy, but luckily I never heard from him or saw him again. This is the story of my freshman year in college. I went to a smaller university. There were only a few thousand students that attended it, so the campus wasn't very large, but I liked that about this place. However, my first year, I had to live in the dorms. To save a little bit of money and maybe make a friend, I chose to have a random roommate. This decision backfired. I didn't know anybody at the college when I got there, and the first person that I met was the roommate. He told me that his name was Joe. Joe was a strange guy. Overall, he was rude, unfriendly, and he never left the room other than to go to class. He was not at all the type of person that I would normally hang out with. And by the second week, I had given up all hope of being friends with him. I had a TV and a PS4 that I brought with to school, and Joe said that I could never use it because it bothered him. He also demanded that all lights be off after dark. I tried to reason with him once, but he threatened to report me to the dean of students. I wasn't scared by the threat. I didn't really think they would do anything, but I would rather just try to get along with my roommate. Instead, I would do my studying in class buildings around campus. I made other friends at college pretty quickly, and when I was talking with them about Joe one day, they suggested that I get a new room. I hadn't even realized this was an option until they told me, so I put in a request to get my own solo dorm room. I was told that when one came available, they would contact me. About 2 weeks later, so now about a month and a half into the school year, I was contacted. I was told that I could move into a different dorm building that was across the street. This building was a little bit newer and nicer. It had a room that was available, and I accepted it. I decided not to even tell Joe. I didn't know if he would be happy or sad about it, but I didn't want him thinking that I hated him or something. So one day, when Joe was gone at his classes, at a time that I didn't have class, I packed up all my stuff and just left. Without saying a word, my entire half of the room was now gone. I moved into my new building and got my new room. It was so nice to finally have a place all to myself. I could watch TV, play PlayStation, and not have any complaints. I could even have my friends over to hang out. However, I did want to be careful not to see my old roommate Joe. Like I said, it was a small campus, so there was a chance that we would cross paths. If we did, I didn't want him to ask me why I left or something. I was careful to avoid him, and I didn't see him at all for a couple of days. As for my new room, at first it was great, but on probably the second or third night that I was there, something happened. I was playing video games late at night, and I heard somebody try to open my door. It was locked, so it didn't open. After a few seconds, I got up to look out of my peephole. When I was walking towards the door, I heard somebody knock on it. There weren't even that many people that knew I lived here yet, so I found this to be really strange. When I got to the door, I saw Joe standing there. I did not want to answer it, and I quietly moved away from the door. He knocked one more time, and I didn't answer that either. I was really creeped out. I mean, how did he even know that I lived here? I didn't tell him, and I wasn't friends with him on Snapchat or anything where he could see my location. This was really strange. I went back and looked like 10 minutes later, and he was finally gone. I didn't know why he had come here. There was no reason that I could think of. Well, the next morning, I got up and had to go to class. When I left my room, I walked down a couple of hallways to get to the front of the building. In one of the hallways was a sort of lounge study area. When I was approaching it, I saw Joe sitting in one of the chairs there. I couldn't believe that he was in my dorm building. He didn't live here. I didn't know what he was doing. I turned around and left out of another exit. I thought maybe he was following me. It was really strange. Later on in that same day, I was walking on campus and I happened to notice him again. There was sort of a lot of other people walking around, and I saw him a ways behind me. I walked back to my dorm building, and he seemed to almost follow me there. He wasn't walking close enough to follow me inside or anything, but I was very suspicious when I noticed. I got back in my building and was wondering what this guy's problem was. Well, that same night, he was back at my room. Once more, I was up late, and he tried entering. It was locked like always, and he then knocked on the door. This time, it was louder than before. I didn't answer, but was watching him through the peephole. He knocked again very loudly, but I still did nothing. When he knocked for a third time, I remember somebody else who lived down the hall opened up their door. They told him to quiet down. Joe didn't say anything. Then, he stood there for probably a minute. After that, he backed up a step and then kicked my door extremely loud and hard. I was honestly afraid that the door might break, but it didn't. Joe then turned and stormed off. After this, I made up my mind that I was going to report him, and the next day, I did. Somebody must have talked to him or something, because I stopped seeing him after that, and he did not return to my room. I was still very suspicious that he would follow me around or show up again or something for like a month, but luckily he didn't. A while after this, I met somebody that used to know him. They weren't really his friend, but had several classes with him. They told me that he had dropped out, and also said that his name wasn't even Joe. None of these things really surprised me. I'm not sure why he gave me a fake name, but he was a weird guy. Looking back, I'm really glad that I moved out when I did. Several years ago, when I was broke, I moved to a new city for a job. This job was not the most well-paying job, but it was decent. Because I had no money going into it though, I had to find a cheap place to live. I ended up going onto Craigslist and finding a roommate there. I know that sounds sketchy, and the truth is that it is sketchy, because the guy that I was roommates with was weird. At first, he seemed normal enough, but I never actually met him in person until I moved into the apartment. We had a 2-bedroom place, and it was right outside of the city. My roommate's name was Kevin, and he was thin, had longer hair, and was about my age. The apartment that we got was not very nice. It was located in not the best neighborhood, and the building was old and a little bit run down. We had a living room, a small kitchen, and then a hallway where Kevin's room was at one end. The bathroom was sort of across from Kevin's room, and then my bedroom was at the other end of the hallway. I knew that living with Kevin would be temporary, and as soon as I had enough money to move to a better place, I would. After meeting Kevin and moving in, he just seemed a little bit strange. He was not that friendly, and for the most part, he stayed out of my way, which was nice, and I stayed out of his. Kevin seemed to be a pretty private guy, and didn't have much interest in being friends or anything, and that was fine. One thing he did though, was he would forget to lock the main door of our apartment. There was like 5 different times where I know I locked the door and then I would see it unlocked. I tried to talk to him about it once and he kind of blew me off. This made me kind of mad, because many times I remember I would get up to use our only bathroom, which was right across from Kevin's room. So I would have to walk by his door to use the bathroom, and Kevin would be in his bedroom when I was going to use the bathroom a lot of times. When I would start to approach, I would literally hear him locking his door. It was like he was afraid that I was going to try to go into his room, so he was locking it. And I never once tried to enter his room. I never even knocked on his door. So it was annoying how he would always do that, but seemingly forget to lock the front door. In the apartment that we lived in, I would have liked to have the front door locked all the time. Luckily though, my bedroom also had a lock on it. One night I was sleeping, but woke up in the middle of the night. The first thing that I remember after waking up is that I heard somebody right outside my bedroom door. My heart started racing and I didn't know what to do. Whoever this person was already inside the apartment, probably because Kevin left the door unlocked. I then heard this noise, like somebody was messing around with the lock on my door. Maybe they were trying to pick it. This went on for like a minute, but luckily they didn't get in. I got my phone that was next to my bed and I called the police. Then I turned on my bedroom light. When this happened, I heard whoever it was moving away from the door and seemingly back out towards the living room. I didn't leave my room until the police arrived. By then, I hadn't heard anything in a long time. I finally left my bedroom and saw that our front door was left unlocked again. The police came in and searched the place. While this was going on, Kevin left his bedroom, apparently woken up by the commotion. He said that he didn't see or hear anything. The police didn't find anybody, and nothing was stolen or missing. I even remember when the police were there, Kevin loudly said to me, "Are you sure you weren't dreaming the whole thing?" I found this comment to be a little bit rude, because I knew that I wasn't. The police also heard him, and I didn't want them to think that I was just imagining the whole thing. The police advised us to keep our door locked, and then they left. After they left, I remember Kevin asking me why I called the cops. It was like he was annoyed that I did. I said because he left the front door unlocked and somebody broke in. Kevin claimed that he didn't leave it unlocked, and he said that our lock must be faulty, but I didn't believe him. I mean, somebody broke into our apartment and tried to get into my bedroom, and Kevin just seemed annoyed by the whole thing. He didn't even seem that concerned. After that, we both went back to our rooms, and I went back to bed. I really couldn't wait to move out of there. Soon, I would have enough money saved up to do so. Several days went by, and everything seemed to be going normal. Then, one night, I was in my bedroom again. Now, usually, I would hang out in my bedroom, and then go to the bathroom and brush my teeth. Then I would return, lock my door, and go to sleep. That was my nightly routine that I had. So on this night, I believe it was a Friday, because I didn't have work the next morning. I know that because I was staying up much later and watching YouTube videos on my phone. It was past the time that I usually went to sleep. I think it was after midnight. I was laying on my bed and my lights were out, but my door was unlocked because I hadn't brushed my teeth yet. I remember all of a sudden seeing my bedroom door start to open. My headphones were in, so I didn't hear anything, but when I saw this, I took them out and looked to the door. After it slowly opened, I saw Kevin entering. When he saw me staring right at him, he stopped, turned around, and then left. I yelled at him asking what he wanted, but he quickly returned to his room. I thought this was really weird and also creepy. So I got up and brushed my teeth, then locked my door and went to bed. The next day, I asked Kevin what he was doing, and he completely denied it. I couldn't believe it. He suggested that I was having another dream. This made me mad, but I didn't say anything. Instead, I realized that it was probably him the night I had called the police. I don't think anybody else even entered our apartment. I mean, nothing was stolen and nothing was messed up. Plus, the person went right for my room. So I started looking for a new place that same day. Within a week, I moved out. Ever since then, I haven't seen or heard from Kevin, and I'm hoping that I never do. Last year, I was trying to sell my 2007 Mercury Mariner. It was in pretty good shape, but had a lot of miles, and it's kind of old. But overall, it ran very good and is a good car. I decided to list it on Craigslist because I've had experience buying cars on there before. When I had used Craigslist in the past, it had gone pretty well. So I took several pictures of the car, and then listed it. The next day, I didn't get any interest at all. But on the second day, I got a response to the ad. The text message came from a man saying that his name was Al and that he wanted to buy the car. He seemed pretty confident about it right away. I was asking a pretty reasonable price, so I gave him my address to come and look at it. Now, I lived in an apartment building. I didn't think it was a big deal to give out the address, because there were several buildings in the complex. My car was already parked out in the parking lot, and the guy would have no way of knowing which apartment was mine. So I asked Al when he was free, and he said he could come by the next day after work at 9 p.m. I said okay, and then I cleaned out the car and got it ready for selling. The following night, I left my apartment building and went to my car in the parking lot. Al showed up shortly after and parked nearby. He got out and I met him by my Mariner. Al was a big guy, had lots of tattoos, was probably about 250 pounds and 6 feet tall. After meeting, I showed Al the car and he looked around at it. After several minutes, he asked to take it for a test drive. I went with him and Al drove the car around the block and down some nearby streets. I remember that he said he liked it and it seemed fine. At that point, I was really thinking that I was going to sell the car that night. After the test drive, we returned to my apartment complex, and he parked the car in the space that it had been before. But then, after we got out of the car, Al just said that he would think about it. I was disappointed, because it seemed like he was going to buy it before. But I just said okay, and then said bye to him. But that's when Al asked me if he could use my bathroom quick. This seemed sketchy. Why did he think it would be okay with me for him to use my bathroom? I said no thanks and started walking away. To me, I was afraid that it might be some sort of a setup. I didn't want this guy coming into my apartment. He was still kind of standing around by my car though. My apartment building had a side door and a front door. The side door was not very far away, so I decided to walk to the front. I left Al standing there and headed inside. I was kind of afraid that he was going to follow me, but when I left and got to the front doors, I looked back and didn't see him at all. This made me feel better and I entered the building. When I got inside, I turned to the right and then entered the elevator. I took it up to the 3rd floor, which is the level that my apartment was on. When I arrived, I stepped off and started walking to the left. But when I did, I saw the door at the end of the hallway open that led to a stairwell. I saw Al entering the hallway. What was he doing here? At first, I started going towards my door, but then saw Al going towards me. I quickly stopped and then turned and started walking in the opposite direction. At that point, I started to hear Al begin to run in my direction, so I started sprinting to the end of the hallway. When I made it there, I went into the stairs on the other side and ran down. As I was going down the stairs, I heard Al enter the stairwell and continue to chase me. Then I went into the underground parking garage beneath the building. When I got down there, I ran across it to the other end of the building. I had extended my lead on Al a little bit. I heard him get to the parking garage and keep chasing me though. Then I got to the stairs on the other side and ran up them to the ground level, then left through the side door. After I was out of the building, I ran to my car and got inside. Then I just left and drove away. I called the police while driving off and told them about the man. I drove around the streets nearby for a few minutes and then returned. When I did, Al's car was still there and he was not inside of it. The police got there just a couple of minutes later. I didn't go back inside the building until they did, and when they did, they actually found Al attempting to break into another apartment. So it turns out he was never interested in buying my car. I guess he was just going to try to rob me or something. One time, I was going to buy a TV on Craigslist. This was years ago, but I would browse Craigslist at work all the time back then. Several times, I got really good deals, or things for free. You never really knew what you would find there. But you also had to be very careful. So I found this really good deal on a nice TV. I was in the market for one, and the ad looked legit. The price was cheap, but not so cheap that it would make me wonder if it was too good to be true. The pictures of the TV appeared to be in somebody's home. I responded to the advertisement and said that I would like to buy the TV if it was still available. Within an hour, I got a text back from the seller saying that it was available. It was a woman who said her name was Joy. She gave me an address and told me to come over the following night to buy the TV. I looked up the address, and it appeared to be a house in a neighborhood that was maybe 10 minutes away. So the next day, I got the cash and drove to the address. I parked on the side of the street in front of the house in what appeared to be an average neighborhood. I think it was about 7 p.m. When I knocked on the door, it was quickly answered by a woman. She looked to be in her 30s and was about average height with dark hair. She said hi and invited me inside. I stepped into what looked to be the living room of the house. There were boxes around and stuff, as if maybe they were moving. There really wasn't that much furniture, and Joy said sorry that it was a mess, and I said it was fine. She then told me that the TV was in her bedroom. She then led me to the hallway and stopped and opened the door to the bedroom. She said the TV was in there, and I stepped inside. When I did, I noticed that the room appeared to be completely empty though. And right after I got inside, the door slammed shut behind me. It all happened so fast. I looked around and there was no TV in there. I turned back and saw that Joy had closed the door on me. She hadn't even entered the room. I walked over and tried opening the door, but it was locked from the outside. It was so weird. I knocked on the door and asked Joy what was going on, but she did not answer me. I kept trying the door for a minute or two, and it just wouldn't open. Then I was yelling for somebody to open the door, but was getting no response. After realizing that wasn't working, I looked around the room. It was a small bedroom and was completely empty. There was literally no furniture at all. I got out my phone and tried calling my friend, but I was getting no signal in there. I thought that was weird. I tried opening the door and calling for help again, but it was apparent that nobody was going to respond to me. I looked around the room, wondering what on earth was going on. Several minutes into this, and I started to hear noises coming from outside the room. It seemed like they were coming from the living room area. It was Joy and the sound of a man's voice. I couldn't tell what they were saying, but I could just hear that they were talking to each other. I yelled again, but got no response. After that, I went over to the window and tried to open it, but for some reason, it wouldn't budge. This angered me, and I went back over to the door and started banging on it as hard as I could. I wanted to break the door down. Then I heard a man's voice yelling at me to stop from down the hallway. I didn't know what these people were capable of. I did stop, but just for a moment. Then I took up my phone and found my alarms. I turned my volume all the way up and started playing the most annoying alarm noise. Then I put my phone at the far side of the room. I then walked over and stood just behind the door on the other side of that. Within probably 30 seconds, I heard somebody walking towards the room. Then they got right outside the door. The door then opened and a man walked in. He turned and first started going towards my phone, making all the noise. I came out from around the corner and ran past him, leaving the room. He tried grabbing me at the last second, but I just barely slipped by him. When I ran out of the room, I went down the hallway. Then, when I got to the living room, I saw Joy standing there. She sort of tried to stop me, but I was going too fast and got around her as well. By now, the man had started to run after me. I opened up the door, and when I was doing so, Joy grabbed at my arm. I just got out the door, though. They were both running towards me, and I sprinted for my car, and luckily still had my keys on me. I unlocked my car, got inside, and sped away from there. Now, sadly, I left my phone, so I couldn't immediately call the police. I stopped at the first gas station that I saw, went inside, and asked an employee to call the police. They got to the gas station, and after talking with police, we went back to the house. They recovered my phone on the side of the street a block up. When they went to the house, nobody was there. I found out that those people did not actually live in the home, and somebody else had been renting it. So I don't know if those two were ever caught. When I looked, the Craigslist post was gone. I just know that I'm never using Craigslist again after that. I'm a male, and this happened roughly 2 years ago. I was selling my old phone on Craigslist after getting a new one. There was nothing wrong with the old phone, and it was only 2 years old. I figured there would be a good market for it, so I listed it on Craigslist. Now I was debating between eBay, Facebook Marketplace, or Craigslist. Obviously, I ended up choosing Craigslist. The price I was asking was pretty good. I didn't care about making a bunch of money off it. I really just wanted to sell the phone fast. And after posting it, I think within a few hours, I got a text message regarding the phone. Somebody told me that they were interested in buying it. I responded to them and said that it was available and they could buy it as soon as they wanted. After texting back and forth a bit longer, I gathered that it was a woman whose name was Molly. We arranged to meet up the following day outside of a local strip mall. It was, I think, located roughly halfway for us both, so it was a good meeting point. The next day, I took my phone and drove to the location to sell it. When I got there, everything went as planned. Molly showed up and bought the phone from me. Then we both went our separate ways. In the encounter, everything seemed normal. We didn't talk a whole lot, but I didn't notice anything strange about Molly at all. Over the next few days, things were fine. But then Molly began to text me. She was texting me telling me to come over, and then asking if she could come to my place. This came relatively out of nowhere. In fact, at first I thought she must have the wrong number. That is, until I saw her mention my name. I mean, we were not hanging out. I was just selling her my iPhone. That was the only time I saw her. And I also did not happen to be interested in her. But even if I was, this was not the way to go about it. She sent about 4 or 5 texts within an hour of each other late one night. I thought maybe she was drunk and that explained the behavior. But she then texted me the next morning as well, once again saying that she wanted to come over. I told her that I had a girlfriend. I didn't, but I just wanted her to leave me alone. She said that didn't matter. Then she continued to text me as if we were best friends or something, saying what's up and asking what I was doing. I was still very confused by all of this. When it continued for another day, I asked her to stop, but she did not. She became angry and started cursing me out and stuff. At that point, I blocked her. I thought that was it, and even that was a pretty crazy story. I mean, I guess you never know what could happen when you use Craigslist. But that very same night, Molly actually showed up at my house. I remember hearing a knock at my front door. During this time, I lived alone in a small house that I rented. When I looked out of the front window, I saw her standing there, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, how did she know where I lived? Had she followed me home? I answered the door, just to tell her to leave me alone. When I opened up though, she instantly started cursing me out. I told her to leave, and she wouldn't. She started to advance forward as if to enter my house. At that point, I slammed the door shut on her and locked it. She tried opening it, and then seemingly ran away. I just know that I saw her running away off the front step. I assumed that she was going, but I was wrong. Probably 30 seconds to a minute later, I heard a noise at one of the back windows. It was like a banging noise. I knew that it was her, and I instantly called the police. Then I sat inside and waited. She was pounding on the window, and then she went over and tried opening up the back door to the house. At one point, I opened up a window a distance away and warned her that I had called the police, but she didn't seem to care. She stayed there, moving from windows to doors and banging on them the entire time until the police showed up. They were finally able to stop her. I ended up having to get a restraining order against Molly. I honestly have no idea why she wouldn't leave me alone. I suspect drug use, but who knows? This has taught me to be more careful when using things like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. For a little bit of background to this story, I live in a quiet neighborhood. It's not in the middle of nowhere, and we have neighbors, but everyone has a little bit more land. I would say most properties are about 2 or 3 acres large. I live with my wife, but when this took place, she was out of town with her best friend. So I had just finished mowing the lawn, and I saw that I got a text message from a new number on my phone. I had no idea as to who it was. The text said the person was from Craigslist and they wanted to know if they could come over. Now, I have never used Craigslist before in my life, and I was pretty sure my wife hadn't either. I texted back saying that it was the wrong number and I didn't use Craigslist. Within a short time, I got a response, which was my exact address. Then they said, "This is your address, right?" I was really creeped out when I read it, and I didn't know how to respond. I called my wife and asked her if she had any idea what this could be, but she didn't know. So I just didn't respond to the number, hoping that it was maybe a joke or something. Several hours went by, and then I received another text from this number. This time, the text said, "So can I come over or what?" I responded saying, "No, don't come over. I have nothing for sale." I did not get a response for a while, not until about 10 o'clock that night. There was then a text message from the same number saying, "I'm here." This one really creeped me out. I texted back saying, "Who are you?" The response was that they were from Craigslist, which confused me even more. But it was time to see if this guy was all talk or if he actually showed up. I moved out into the living room and looked out of my front window. The neighborhood typically gets very dark at night and does not have streetlights, so I couldn't really see much. I wasn't noticing any cars in my driveway or on the road or anything. I went over and sat back down on the couch in the family room where I had been. That room was just a ways off of the living room. Probably like 10 seconds after sitting down, I got another text. It said, "Check the front window." I got up and walked into the living room. As soon as I stepped into it, I saw this man standing right outside of the living room window. He was maniacally staring at me with these wide eyes. It was one of the strangest things I've ever seen, and I did not recognize the guy at all. I called the police right then and there. The guy kept standing there for the next minute or so, not moving. Then, suddenly, he just turned and ran off, sprinting out of my sight. The cops came out and searched all around. The guy had run away though, and was gone. I blocked the number and checked out the front window several more times after the police left, but he didn't come back, thankfully. And I haven't seen or heard from the man since then. It's still a big mystery to me though. How did he get my address? And who exactly was he? I really have no idea. My name is Francisco, and I used to work at a sporting goods store when I was younger. This was back when I was like 19 or 20, and lived with my parents when I wasn't at college. I held the job at the sporting goods store since my senior year of high school, and I worked there for about 3 years total. During, I believe, my first summer break from college, there was a newer employee to the store. It was a girl named Emma. She was around my age and was short, had dark hair, and I didn't know anything about her other than that. We didn't have a whole lot of employees at our store. There would maybe be about 5 to 7 of us working at once. Usually 2 at the check lanes and the rest around different departments of the store. I'm not sure exactly when Emma got hired, but she worked there when I got back from college. We worked together a handful of times. I would work both as a cashier and in some other departments as well. A few times I spoke briefly with Emma, but not too much. She seemed cool for the most part, but not really the type of person that I would usually hang out with. I remember that one night, I guess Emma and I both got off at the same time. I believe it was 9 p.m. I had been working near the golf department, and she was in another part of the store. As we were both clocking out, she asked me if I drove there, and I replied that I did. She then asked me if I could give her a ride home. I didn't mind too much, but asked first where she lived. It was a city that was not that far away from mine, and was maybe like 5 minutes out of the way, so not a huge deal. I said yes, and then we left the store together. We got into my car, and she gave me the address to her house, which I drove to. The place was an older-looking apartment complex, where she said that she lived with her boyfriend. She was nice and told me thanks for giving her a ride, and then I left and went home. I didn't think much of the interaction. Now, I worked the next day, an earlier shift. My availability was pretty much all day on most days, because it was summer and I didn't have school. Emma was not working on this day though. I remember that it was like 12 o'clock in the afternoon or something. The store was not very busy, as it usually was quiet at this hour. I was working towards the back, stocking one of the shelves near the baseball equipment. I saw this guy enter the aisle and start aggressively walking over to me. He had dark short hair, like a buzz cut, and the guy was not that tall, but somewhat strong looking. He looked right at me and asked me who I thought I was. I told him I had no idea who he was or what he was talking about. The guy told me that he was Emma's boyfriend and accused me of, quote, trying to take his girl. I realized that there must have been some huge misunderstanding of what happened. Either that or this guy was an extremely jealous boyfriend who didn't trust Emma at all. I really didn't want to get in the middle of their problems. He was like right up in my face, asking if I thought I was a tough guy. I told him to calm down and said I didn't do anything with Emma. I told him she simply asked me for a ride home from work, so I gave her one. The boyfriend then told me that his car was working fine, and she could have asked him. I told him I didn't know that, and further said that I didn't even know she had a boyfriend until she told me the previous night. He seemed to actually calm down a bit. I told him I could assure him that I was not trying to steal his girl, and he had nothing to worry about. He told me that he better not, quote, catch me tripping again, and then he walked away. After the interaction, I was really surprised that he got so angry. I also started to wonder if Emma was stuck in a bad relationship or something. The next time I worked with her was a couple of days later. When I saw her, I walked over and said hi. I told her about what her boyfriend did, and she said sorry, but he gets like that sometimes. I asked her if everything was okay in their relationship. That's when she told me that she actually broke up with him the day before, which would have been the day after he confronted me. She also said that she moved back in with her parents. I told her sorry, and she said that she was fine and happy to be moving on. So after that, I went back to work and didn't see Emma for the rest of my shift. That night, Emma got off at like 7 and I got off at 9 again. After clocking out, I walked through the parking lot to my car. When I got in my car and left, I was followed home by Emma's ex. I know this because the car was parked not that far away from me in the parking lot. I noticed it because the parking lot was almost empty, and after getting inside my car when I started to drive away, the other car left right after me. Because of our two cars being basically the only ones around, I found this a little bit odd. Then when I left, the car made all of the first 3 or 4 turns that I did. When we got to a stoplight, I looked back to see the man was driving. I didn't get an exact look at his face with it being night, but he resembled Emma's boyfriend. I drove the rest of the way home until I got to my street. Then I wasn't really sure what to do. I went around the block twice, with him staying on my tail. Finally, I decided to just pull into my driveway, and I did so and then got out of my car. He pulled into the driveway after me, but I sprinted out of my car really quickly and around the house into the backyard. I didn't look to see what the guy did. I knew that my parents usually kept the sliding glass door in our backyard unlocked, so I quickly got in the house that way. When I looked, the man didn't chase me. I shut the door and then locked it, and then I covered it with blinds. Then I went back around to the front window and looked out. When I did, I saw that the guy was getting back into his car, and he then drove away. I also confirmed that it was in fact Emma's ex-boyfriend. I thought about calling the police, but decided not to. I hoped that this guy would just realize there was no reason to go after me. I didn't work for a few days after that. I just happened to have some off days in a row, which was nice. In this free time, one of the days I went to the mall with a few friends. There was a really large mall not far away from where I lived. We were doing some shopping for a number of things, and I was having a great time until I noticed Emma's ex-boyfriend again, and I didn't think that this was just a coincidence. I didn't feel scared at all because I was with 3 of my friends. When we were in the food court, the guy was sitting a ways away at a table by himself. He was sort of facing us, and I pointed him out to my friends and told them the story. They said we should go up to him, but I said no. I didn't want a big fight to break out or something. So we stayed there and then left a while later. I saw him walking a ways behind us about 30 minutes after that at another location in the mall. It was really creepy. I was honestly so surprised that this guy was after me. Did he seriously think that I was responsible for his breakup? We left the mall later that day, and I didn't see the guy for the rest of it. The next time I worked, Emma also happened to be there. When I saw her, I walked up and asked her how she was doing. She told me that she was doing really good and was going to be moving to Seattle in 2 weeks. We lived in California, so that was a ways away. I told her, "That's great, but your ex-boyfriend is stalking me." She asked me why, and I said probably because he thinks I'm responsible for them breaking up. She said that was crazy and that I had nothing to do with it. I told her to tell him that then, but she said she had him blocked on everything and wasn't going to contact him. I realized that this guy was probably just taking all of his anger out on me, or at least was trying to. I was seriously considering getting the police involved. Once more, Emma got off before me, and I got off work later that night. I walked out to my car and saw another one parked by me again. It was the same guy. This was getting me really angry. But this time, when I got within maybe 10 feet of my car, Emma's ex got out of his. He then started walking over to me, all aggressive. I asked him why he kept following me around, and he didn't say anything. He just kept walking towards me. Then he got right up in my face again and took a swing at me. I moved, but he still got me a little in the side of the head. I took a swing at him, but missed. Then he got me good. I'm embarrassed to say, but I pretty much got the tar kicked out of me. In my opinion, it was clearly not his first fight. For me, it was my first fight since probably the second grade. So he hit me like 4 or 5 times, and I maybe got like 1 or 2 punches to him, which didn't seem to hurt him much. I fell to the ground, and after that, he then walked off and went back into his car. I was just glad that he didn't kick me while I was down. Then he drove off. I gathered myself and then called the police and told them what happened. They came out to my location, and I ended up getting some medical aid on the scene, but overall I was fine. I only had some bruises and scrapes, and luckily no concussion or anything. Finally, I was able to go home. The police said that they would look into the guy. Well, the next day, I got word that he was arrested. Apparently, he already had a warrant for failure to appear on some other charge. I think it was theft. And he had a bit of a history of run-ins with the law. I also filed charges against him for assault. It was a huge relief that he was off the streets and would stop following me. I was really mad for a while about getting mixed up in that whole deal. Looking back, I'm just glad that I'm okay. Last year, I had a really creepy experience. For a little background, I live by myself and have a house. This was the same situation for when this story occurred. It all started when I was at home one night. It was probably like 9 or 10 p.m. Usually I stay up kind of late, so I wasn't about to go to bed or anything. But when I heard a knock on my front door, I did think it was unusual. I walked over and looked out the window. There was a woman standing there. I was unsure if I should open the door or not. I waited to see if she would walk away, but about a minute later, she knocked on the door again. I decided to answer and opened up the door for her. She had long blonde hair, looked to be in her 20s, and was wearing a black sweatshirt. Right when I opened up the door, she asked me if she could come inside. I asked her why. The woman responded, saying that there was some guy that was after her. I told her that I could call the police, but she interrupted me and asked me again if she could just come inside. I didn't let her though. I suggested calling the police again, but she said no. When I asked her why not, she just turned and walked away rather quickly. I was pretty confused. I looked around, trying to see if there was a man any place. I didn't see one though. The woman went down the street and was quickly out of my sight. I went back inside after that and then went to bed. By the next day, I had forgotten about the encounter for the most part. I went to work as usual, but after that I was home again and it was later at night. I was in my living room and just noticed out the window somebody walking by out front. It was the same woman as the night before, and she was walking on the street in front of my house. I was not aware of her living in my neighborhood. I had never seen her before until the night prior. It was also unusual for people to walk on the side of my street, so this was overall a very strange situation. When she was in front of my house, she kind of stopped and looked at my house. I noticed this, and then she seemed to kind of notice me looking at the window at her. Then she kept walking past my house down the street. I wasn't quite sure who she was or why she was hanging around my neighborhood all of a sudden. I thought perhaps she had moved in down the street or something, but honestly, I had no idea. I saw her again the very next day though. This time I was driving to work, and I remember that after making it out of my neighborhood, a car was driving behind me. For whatever reason, at the stoplight, I looked at the car behind me in my mirror. The driver looked an awful lot like the woman who I kept seeing. I was almost positive that it was her, but she was wearing sunglasses, so I wasn't quite 100%. It was strange to see her again though, but I didn't even have the thought that she was following me in her car. But as I kept driving, I noticed her making all of the turns that I did. Eventually, I was like 90% there and she was still driving behind me. By now, I was about 99% sure that she was the same woman. It took me about 15 minutes to get to work, and when I got there, she pulled into the parking lot after me. I was shocked. I knew she didn't work here, but when I drove into where I always parked, she drove through the lot a different way. Her car went out of my sight, and I couldn't tell if she was parking or driving away. I just went into work and didn't see her for the rest of the time that I was at work that day or when I was leaving. And for the next 2 days, I didn't see her at all. And I was even a little more suspicious during those 2 days. I would look out of my windows a little bit more at night, but I didn't see her at all. Then, one night, once again, I was home by myself. Except this time, it was later, probably a little bit after midnight. I was just about to go to sleep and in my bed. That's when I heard a sort of loud noise. It was coming from what sounded like outside, near the back of my house. I got up and went out to my doorway. That's when I heard another loud noise. This time, it was clear that it came from the back window. Somebody was hitting it with something. I didn't know who it was or what they were doing, so I stayed in my bedroom. I closed the door and then I called the police and told them that I thought somebody was trying to break into my house. A short time later, I heard another loud noise, and then it sounded like somebody was inside. I stayed in my room and quickly locked the door. Whoever was inside of my house slowly walked around, but soon I heard them opening a door a ways away. They never really got that close to my bedroom. Then I stopped hearing any noises. It took me a while to realize that they had likely gone into my basement. For the next 5 minutes or so, everything was silent. Then the police arrived. I ran out of my room to let them in. Once they entered, I let them know that I thought somebody was in my basement. They went down, and a short time later came out with the same woman who I kept seeing. I should have known it was her. I was glad that she wouldn't be bothering me anymore, but I never got an answer. Why was she seemingly stalking me? I still don't know. I'm a female, and the story happened about 2 years ago. I switched jobs around that time, after working in one office building for about 1.5 years. There was a better job opportunity for me, so I took it. Now, the first office that I had worked in was not a bad job. I liked most of my coworkers, and there were quite a few people that were in the building. When I started my new job, though, I liked it even more. But not long after starting, one day I got a text from one of my old coworkers, who was a man named Jeremy. Jeremy worked in the office and occasionally would talk to me, but not a whole lot. I always thought that he was a little bit weird and creepy. Several other people around the office did too. It was just based on his personality and some of the things that he would say or do. So he texted me asking me to hang out. It was kind of out of nowhere, and I didn't know why he would do that. I wasn't sure how to respond. Before I did though, he texted me again. I guess I took too long to reply, and he accused me of ignoring him because I had seen the text but not yet responded. It had only been like 2 hours. I finally responded and told him that I would not be available to hang out with him. He asked me why not, and I said that I was just really busy with work and stuff. He didn't respond to me for a few days after that. I forgot about it and didn't think that he would text me again. But then he called me on my cell phone. I was not expecting it and didn't answer. The call was sometime at night, but not that late. After he called me, he left a message. I remember when I played it, I got really creeped out. In the message, he was talking to me about how he knew I wasn't too busy to hang out with him. He said that he knew I didn't even work the previous day and didn't go anywhere. And he was right. I didn't have work and hadn't gone anywhere. But how did he know that? I realized that he must have somehow drove to my house or something. So I texted him, asking him how he knew that I had stayed home the previous day. I remember right after I sent it, I saw the 3 dots indicating that he was typing. This went on for a while and then disappeared without a text. He didn't respond. After that, I started to pay more attention to outside when I was home. The next night, shortly after getting back home from work, I noticed a car parked on the side of the road. It was in one corner, which had a good view of my house. I couldn't see inside the car or who was driving or anything. It was too far away, but I was suspicious. Nothing else weird happened that night though. But the next night, I received another phone call from Jeremy, this time at 1 o'clock in the morning. I didn't hear it or see it until the next morning because I had been asleep. He did not leave a message though. I texted him asking him why he called me at 1 a.m. and why he was being so weird. He did not respond, so I decided to block him, something that I should have done long before. But I thought maybe he would give me some sort of explanation or something. For the next couple of days, everything was fine. Then I got back home sort of late from work. Afterwards, I was just planning to go to bed and was really tired. But about 20 minutes after arriving back to my house, I heard a knock at the front door. I walked over and looked to see Jeremy standing there. I foolishly decided to answer. I was thinking that I could talk to him and be clear that I wanted him to leave me alone. As soon as I opened up the door, Jeremy rushed inside and started to grab me. We struggled very briefly and I was able to free myself. It all happened so fast, it's kind of a blur in my memory. I just remember him charging at me, and then I got away. I ran outside of the house, which was my first instinct for some reason. Jeremy started to go after me. I ran through my front yard and into the street. Then I went into my neighbor's yard across the street. But surprisingly, Jeremy stopped chasing me when he got to the street. I saw that he ran in a different direction. Then he ran to the corner and got inside of a car and drove away. I went back inside after that and called the cops. They came out a short time later, and I told them everything I could about Jeremy. Long story short, I got a restraining order against him, and he hasn't bothered me since.